call to order this special session of the Loudoun County Planning Commission work session for Thursday, June 16th, 2022. Our first order of business will be to stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I think we can dispense with the opening remarks and consideration of time this evening, and move directly to the review and adoption of the minutes for the last work session. Do I hear a motion?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I move that the Planning Commission approve the minutes for the Loudoun County Planning Commission work session dated April 6th, 2022 as presented.
Second.
The motion made by Vice Chair Solomon and properly seconded by Commissioner Miller. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The ayes have it. The motion carries. Next on our agenda, we'll hear disclosures. Commissioner Barnes. None, Commissioner Vance.
I have none, sir.
Commissioner Miller.
None at this time.
Commissioner Frank.
Just one earlier today on June 16th, I attended the groundbreaking ceremony for the Ashburn Rec Center on the edge of the Broad Run District, and with Supervisor Glass, Supervisor Turner, Supervisor Briskman, and various wonderful Parks and Rec and DTCI and all kinds of other staff that joined us. And in 3 years, hopefully everybody can use the wonderful new facility.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Merrithew.
None, sir.
Commissioner Kirshner.
None, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Combs.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On June 13, I had a meeting with Cliff Kearse, resident of Broadlands and former planning commissioner, regarding the Hyde Park application. On June 15, I had a Zoom meeting with Molly Novotny and Adam Cook regarding the Compass Creek rezoning application. And on June 15, I had a phone conversation with Hobie Mitchell regarding the Clear Springs application.
Vice Chair Solomon.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. On Saturday, June 4th, I met with Hobie Mitchell, Mike Wilkins, and others to discuss the application in the Catoctin district. What's that called? Clear Springs. They changed it.
And Daryl Quisenberry.
And Daryl was not there.
Oh, okay.
On Monday, June 6th, I met with Mike Romeo regarding innovation multifamily. On Friday, June 10th, I met with Brian Winterhalter regarding Ravenna at Innovation Station. And that concludes my disclosures. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Thank you.
You have one.
Commissioner Miller.
On June 15th, I met with Molly Novotny from Cooley and Adam. What's Adam's last name? Oh, sorry. Cook. That's what I thought. Cook. Adam Cook from Peterson regarding the Compass Creek application.
Okay. And then I will just close that earlier today. I met with Mr. Capretti, Michael Capretti, in Chair Randall's office about Arcola. And I think that wraps up the disclosures for the evening. And that moves us to our one and only work session item for the evening. ZMAP 2021-0003, SPEX 2021-0004, SPEX 2021-0011, ZMod 2021-0003, ZMod-2021-0004, ZMod-2021-0005, ZMod-2021-0006, ZMod-2021-0047, and ZMod-2021-0092, Ravana at Innovation Station. How are you, sir?
Good evening, Mr. Chair.
It is good to see you.
Pleasure is mine, sir.
How are you, Jackie?
I'm doing great this evening. How are you?
It is good to see you as well.
Good to see you.
So I think we will start with you, if you would like.
We're actually going to have the applicant go first this evening.
Okay.
If it meets with the commission's approval, I thought that it would make more sense for the applicant to go over all the changes that they've made since the Planning Commission public hearing. And then I can guide the direction from there on what we would like the commission to focus on for this evening.
Well, before we start, I just want to, for the record, given the the direction and the conversation as we left it during the last time we all got together on this application, the commission was very clearly of the opinion that we wanted to see a lot more progress in certain areas. I believe that the applicant was provided with a laundry list of requests that I know the staff took note of. And at this time, before we go any further, we'd like to hear from you as representative of the staff, whether or not you are indeed satisfied with what you've received from the applicant and that you feel comfortable that we should proceed further.
Staff is satisfied and we do feel comfortable proceeding forward with this. We know that the applicant put in a lot of work in their proffers, the concept development plan, and the design guidelines. They turned in a submission May 23rd, 24th. So we are still reviewing that submission. Like I said, they put a lot of work into it, so we need to take the time to review everything. That's why we're not going to have a final recommendation for the commission tonight, but we do think that we have everything that we need. Now we're at the point where we want to have these very important policy discussions with the commission on what the applicant is proposing. So while I can sit here and say we aren't necessarily agreeing with everything that the applicant is presenting to us, that's something that we would expect the commission would give us feedback on. What does the commission think about the applicant's capital facility credits, for example? So the applicant, they have revised their proffer statement. We have reviewed it, and so we do have some baseline discussions for tonight. But we are satisfied, and we do appreciate how much work the applicant has put in.
Well, that is, and I think I speak for the entire group of my colleagues. Colleagues, please speak up if you do not agree. But that is what we wanted to hear from you, Jackie, and I think that we're comfortable in hearing that. And we definitely want to thank the applicant for putting forth so much work, and we are very interested to hear everything that you have to say tonight, and thank you for that in advance. You have the floor.
Mr. Hayes, members of the commission, again, Tony Calabrese with DLA Piper. Delighted and honored to be here this evening. Thank you so much on this stormy summer. Our ownership, Tristan Simon, Stan Nix, Adam, Colin, Bob Woodruff, many of our team members are here to answer any questions from Mr. Chair, you or any of your colleagues. We have the engineers, the transportation and environmental consultants, architects, talented planners, useless lawyers. We really want to convey our appreciation to each and every one of you. We know this is not a regularly scheduled event. I've never been a one and only before, so I'm particularly pleased to be here. We've distributed, again, I think Jackie had sent to all of you via email 2 letters of support. We're very proud of the Washington Area Task Force and the Committee for Dulles put in, I think, some very nice testimony for your consideration. I hope to review what we believe is really some, to your direction, sir, noteworthy progress consistent with the direction from the Commission from April. I'd like to set the stage and bring at least our perspective on where we were, where we are, and where we're going with your help and guidance. I know shockingly to Jackie, quite a few illuminating and hopefully explanatory slides. Bear with me. I'm going to try and go through them relatively quickly, but they really go to the heart of so many of the questions that were raised when we sat here a couple months ago and as articulated in the numerous memoranda that have been distributed to the Planning Commission. So if you'll bear with me, I'd appreciate it. And of course, you'll interrupt me with questions. Finally, I think to Jackie's point, we'll wrap up with a couple of what we perceive are policy questions. Obviously, staff will have their own views on what those are, and we'd appreciate your direction as we continue to move forward with truly one of the most interesting and exciting projects that I've had the pleasure and privilege of working on in quite a few years of practice. This is going to be a little bit challenging for me because I'm going to have to don my glasses, so I think I can see the screen with those on. Jack, you're going to hear a lot of next, so we'll go. I'm going to do this quickly, but I wanted to set the stage for what we heard as the real priorities. I've tried to do this in context of what we heard, both what staff has raised and the individual discussions we've had with many of you all. We'll start out with capital facilities, major reduction in those credit requests, very productive dialogue. Land use mix, you guys have heard a lot about that already. We absolutely believe and will respectfully submit again that we comport with the vision and the objectives of the comprehensive plan, certainly as revised. Design guidelines, important progress there. I have both a clean copy of the revised design guidelines as well as a significantly changed, updated red line if anybody wants to peruse those. Civic uses, specific commitments, there's a lot of discussion about that. We'll probably spend more time on DTCI this evening, which is perfectly fine, but I just do want to convey, because I see Lou and Marie and Karen are all here, some real appreciation on the part of our whole team. We spent a lot of time, as you can see at the bottom, going through quite a few of the issues, and we've gotten much closer than we were when last we were sitting here. Second page of the overview, road improvements and requested credits. And then after I get through the DTCI topics, the last 3 or 4 we'll go through with alacrity: the bicycle, pedestrian improvements, affordable housing, parking. And I think the consensus at the moment is, while I'd like to touch on natural resources and some of the issues that I know Ms. Kirshner even raised at the public hearing, we may ask for a little bit more time on that. I think there's some additional, frankly, feedback we're looking for from the Department of some DEQ. So next. This has got a lot on it, but this is the crux of what I think are some of the most important issues. Ms. Frank and Vice Chair Salmon, in acknowledgement to their good questions, they want to know the bottom line. What's the bottom line? And so I wanted to hit that at the top and the bottom. Since we last were before the Commission, we've had an increase of some $26 million in total monetary contributions. We've dropped the request, at least certainly for the time being. We'll talk about that for Horse Pen Park. As you alluded to yourself, Mr. Chairman, at one point our appraisal actually had significantly more than $19 million, but that was a figure that was bantered about when last we were here. We've dropped the request for the Green Promenade credit. We've reduced Boulder Ridge credit request. I think we've come to a reasonable conclusion on a number of DTCI issues. The interchange, $4 million reduction from where we previously started. We would like to talk about alternatives in that bullet that starts out with owners have proposed dropping the request for Innovation Avenue realigned. There are 2 different credit requests that each are about $8 million, which I'll allude to here in a few minutes. And we've dropped one of them. We think the other, we think actually both of them merit consideration. But in the spirit of what you challenged us to do when last we met, we have dropped that one as well. We're proposing the typical $15,000 plus for market rate units. We've increased the unmet housing need commitment from 6.25% to 8%, up to 218 apartments, an increase of 48. And the bottom line is reflected there. Proffers now commit to $35.6 million in monetary contributions. Next. Horse Pen. We've withdrawn the request for credit for Horse Pen Park. We're just too far apart from staff on that one. I think critically, that and Boulder Ridge and other elements, of course, are really the heart and soul of this project. The proffers remain unchanged in terms of our commitment to the stream restoration, the amenities, the integral element that Horsepen, I think, will present. I drove past the site. I drive past it all the time. I made my kids go walking it with me again about 2 weeks ago, and I'm just more and more resolute about what's possible there. Green Promenade, important. We'll have some graphic depictions of that key connection, but we have dropped the request for capital facilities for the Green Promenade as well. We'll spend a couple minutes, I think, on Boulder Ridge. That's really important from our perspective. We're willing to agree to the spirit of what you requested, which is be reasonable and be compromising. Tristan, Stan, and the rest of the ownership heard you loud and clear. We think Boulder Ridge is really important. Boulder Ridge is approved for significant residential development today under the Dulles World Center entitlements. To the great credit of ownership, Land Design, who is here this evening, they recognize that ridge where Mr. Salmon got 24 ticks or whatever the number was, when we toured it a year and a half ago, really is someplace special. And we think it's a really important amenity. I believe that the staff had come to the conclusion that it did, in fact, qualify as reflected as a neighborhood park, which would have allowed us capital facilities credits. I think we'll probably have a discussion this evening. We've heard over the last week that the county is vacillating about whether they want that as a park or not. We think I don't even think it's a diamond in the rough. I think it's a diamond, period. It's a unique urban experience. It's 4 acres. It's less than a half mile from Metro, and I'll go through some of the depictions here in a bit. We're maintaining the commitment to dedicate it to Loudoun County or its designee. We will implement all the improvements to it. We're not asking for credits for the improvements to the park. That's really important nuance. There was some, I think, misinterpretation about that before. We've not been asking for credit for these amenities that we're adding to the parks, just for the underlying land value, consistent with the county policies. The last DTCI referral, I think, from Karen and crew had the value up to about 7.8. Frankly, we continue to believe that's significantly undervalued. The Myers appraisals was quite a bit higher. We think we're consistent with the comp plan. We want to come to a reasonable conclusion on this and all the topics. Next slide. You all are intimately familiar again with Horsepen, obviously to the left of the screen, the Village Center, Boulder Ridge, and the Green Promenade to the bottom. Next. Again, the integral nature of the open space is key to what's before you. Next. Horsepen Park, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it other than to say the design guidelines have really been refined. There's much more certainty as the type of environment. I think there was a lot of, again, misinterpretation, perhaps particularly from NRT, about us perhaps doing much more active facilities, if you will, in the Horsepen area. That's not the case. We want to open it up to the public. It's pretty unusable today. That's putting it nicely. We want to restore the stream in that area, which has tremendous water quality benefits, we think, not only for this tributary, but downstream as well. And the type of interconnectivity reflected here, the pollinator habitat, the major reforestation, the constraints of the sewer easement, have all come together in a way that I think is going to be uniquely beneficial for Loudoners. Next. There are a couple of areas within the park. I really like this image. I always use this whenever I can. I really like the idea of having a little reception there in the bottom right in an appropriate area of this park. That's about as intensive an activity as we're talking about. It's really educational in nature. It's for strolling. It's for getting reconnected to nature and having the opportunity to, frankly, educate kids about someplace wonderful. Next. Just another excerpt from the design guidelines giving you the, I think, affirmation that you were looking for, Mr. Barnes in particular, about the certainty, the definitiveness, where we can, of things that make sense within every element of Rivanna. Next. I like this area as well. This is basically immediately across from the village, down our main north-south road. You can see the elevated walkway that connects Land Bay A to the village itself. I think this is an area that people are going to frequent and enjoy greatly. Next. You can just keep next, Jackie. So Boulder Ridge for just a minute or two. This is an area, as you know, to the north and to the east of where we just were in Horsepen. It's immediately contiguous to some of our residential areas, to the I think neat boutique hotel that we've been contemplating and frankly have ownerships delivered in other great areas of the country, tree conservation, the trail, the playground, some of the depictions we're about to see. This is about 4 acres. It's a little bit over a quarter mile and less than a half a mile from Metro. I'm not aware at Moorfield Station, Loudon Station, or other 2 rail stations. Frankly, I'd have to really think about whether there's anything like this. I can't think off the top of my head in Fairfax around the Silver District. This is a unique jewel that I think the county will really treasure. I know that everybody who works or lives or plays or recreates here will. Next. Again, just excerpts from the design guidelines, giving you a flavor for what we think is possible. Nothing overly active. Outdoor, I love the Boulder amphitheater idea. We've got a designated area for that, picnic areas, little obstacle courses, perfect things to, frankly, to bring a family, or if you're employed at Rivanna someday or visiting as a hotel guest or in the village and just want to have a little bit less activity and stroll through Boulder Ridge, this is a place to do it. Next. Next. And those are some of the final depictions. It just took some of those precedent images and laid them out on Boulder Ridge, exactly where we think it makes perfectly good sense. I know Tristan's particularly fond of that bottom right exhibit. I think that's him laying there, or that's what Mark Center has claimed, right across from the Village Center. Next. Again, the Green Promenade, no longer requesting capital facilities credit, but a really important east-west connection all the way to Block A, all the way to the Silver Line. Kudos, again, to ownership. They took a big risk. They spent a lot of money to buy the CIT and surrounding properties. Had they not done that, we would not have been guaranteed the type of interconnectivity which is ultimately going to occur to the Silver Line, which hopefully is going to open up again this summer. Next. Again, just to reiterate, Horsepen, we've withdrawn the capital facilities request, same with Green Promenade. We believe that we hope to be able to come to a consensus with staff about an appropriate valuation from Boulder Ridge, and particularly in light of the other changes that have been implemented. Staff's last highest assessment was at about $8 million. We're at 12.5. We think that is frankly low for what the real value is. I remain confident we can conclude something with staff and or the commission. I can move on to the next topic, Mr. Chair, if that's all right. Land use mix and transitions. I'm going to only take a minute. You all are intimately familiar with some really nice compliments that we've had cumulatively from the commission, cumulatively from staff, and many who have been involved in reviewing this project. We think it's the right mix. We think it comports with the plan. There are certainly elements of the plan that comprehensive planning have legitimately pointed out where there might be some ambiguities, if you will, particularly the notion of verticality within the town center, the core area. We'd all say, well, a core means that's where the highest and most dense is supposed to be. But in this case, the most density makes sense exactly where it's shown. Office along the prominent toll road frontage that all of us probably drive through. I know I do at least 3 or 4 times a day. We think this is a great plan with, frankly, the office and some of the higher density residential serving as a buffer, if you will, against the toll road. We have the benefit of the prominence of it overlooking Dulles Airport, which is beautiful, as well as the transition down. Next. Into the village, into Horsepen. Next. That's just an overview. And then I think this might be the last slide on this one. Jackie, if you can go to the next one. Let me just summarize, if I may. Like it or not, we're all dealing in a new world. I think this would have occurred anyway. It's been accelerated by COVID, but the essential ingredient of open spaces, the intriguing, important element of an amenitized village center, as is proposed by owners who have delivered on exactly that type of vision on a number of other projects that we talked about when last we were sitting here. We want to set ourselves apart from Reston Town Center. We don't want to be Tyson's. And we think this is current best practices. Major increase in residential. We are much closer to the comprehensive plan and the UTC recommendations of 60 to 80%. We've leapt from 25 to 50%, just over 2,700. Mr. Merith, you asked the question, as noted. Bill isn't here tonight, John, but we think we'd have to be at least at 4,000 plus units, or we'd have to reduce significantly the amount of office if we wanted to get to 80% as contemplated in the guidance of the plan. We think that ours mix is the right mix. There is an intriguing concept, which we've been talking with staff about. Let's go to the next graphic, Jackie, if we may, I think. Yeah. So the blue, I don't have my pointer, but if you can point out the blue areas that are on the south side of the village for me, now on the south side of the village, we're looking at actually within the village itself, so above the retail. There you go. Thank you. We're actually looking at potentially taking some of the office of Block A and doing, I think, a really interesting idea, which is increasing, at least modestly, the office within the village. That serves a couple of interesting and important purposes, not the least of which is, again, kind of a transition down from much higher density office to perhaps more modest office, creative office within the village itself. Still to be determined, but I love this next graphic. I know Tristan had visited. This is a site out in LA. It's just outside of downtown LA. It's right on the metro system. This is not the architecture that we're proposing. If anybody's interested, I'll share the Lever Architecture website, but it's a really intriguing, interesting building that just from a standpoint of ambiance and transition makes really good sense for us to consider. And the design guidelines as drafted and with staff's help, this is something that we're going to continue to consider as we move forward. Let's move on. Design guidelines, just to cut to it in this one slide, we've eliminated the two-step process, which seemed to be causing a lot of consternation and confusion. And frankly, we accelerated dramatically what staff asked us to do, which is we jettisoned the notion of having guidelines now and standards later, and we've melded them into the guidelines and standards that have now been distributed to the Planning Commission. As noted, it will apply to all of our applications, site plans. The development, of course, will be scrutinized by the Design Review Committee for conformity with those plans. Loudon will have an opportunity, of course, to confirm that they think that's correct. Loudon, in fact, is proffered to have an appointed representative. We only have 5 members of the DRC. Anybody who's interested, be happy to have the board appoint you to the DRC that's ultimately going to be formed. These are by far the most robust design guidelines that exist in Loudoun County, and we believe that we struck the right balance of achieving market flexibility and having the level of detail that staff has desired. Next. Civic uses. I can be pretty quick on this one. We've increased meaningfully the civic uses from 50,000 to 127,000 plus. You can see the types of uses that we think will be scattered throughout and really integrated throughout Rivanna. Staff, again, will have an opportunity to confirm that they think that the civic uses comport with the ordinance and the plan. We think that they will. We know that they will. We'll have an accounting as we submit each site plan of the civic uses that exist. And staff was insistent, and understandably so. They wanted to know when we're going to confirm that we're going to have indoor civic uses. The thinking to date has been a music / performing arts venue, 30 to 35,000 square feet. We still believe that that's very much possible. It'll be a lot more possible when the zoning is done behind us and we're out building the infrastructure. But we think that would be just a great complement. As reflected, we're going to have to implement the indoor civic uses by the time we get to about 2/3 of the residential program. So we have kind of a hard stop. If that hasn't been done, it will be done by then. Next. And as this is pulled from the CDP and the design guidelines, you get a little bit of a flavor with all the different colors sprinkled about of all the neat opportunities we have to create some awesome placemaking literally in every corner, inside and outside of Rivanna. Next. All right, this one will take just a couple minutes, and then I will wrap up, Mr. Chair. I appreciate your patience. DTCI, we've had quite a few changes, great dialogue. We eliminated the Fairfax County model, Tushar's fault, of the vehicle trip equivalency, which seemed to make sense for a while, but actually it's probably Bob's fault. But we think this was the right choice. We've just replaced it with conventional phasing, clarification of plans, proffers, notes, TDM refinements. DTCI is still evaluating the submittal, as Jackie alluded to. We did get it in. It was before midnight on the 23rd, so it was. We know that we submitted quite a lot. We have a robust package, so we appreciate staff looking through it, and we frankly hope to reach consensus on virtually everything that we can make progress tonight and then ideally conclude in July. Next. These, to me, are kind of a synthesis of the major remaining topics: Shaw Road and the consortium, the credit for Innovation Avenue versus the credit for the grandfathering, as I alluded to earlier, of the existing 1,265 residential units. We have 1,265 units improved at Dulles World under the Dulles World moniker today. So between 2 and 3, we'd like to select one to cut to it. And we're still working with DTCI to come to consensus, as I noted, on a few other things. Let me just rifle through those quickly, if I may. So with regard to the consortium, I give Lou and Marie, Joe Kroboth, and others, great credit. There's a real recognition that this quadrant of Loudon has extraordinary potential. We've talked about this before. We have the 2 existing rail stations in Loudon. What do we have at those two rail stations? At the easternmost station on the west side of Dulles, we've got all that industrial and, frankly, data centers that are going on, and we have Dulles Airport. Not much we can do at Dulles Airport. We're pretty constrained about what's possible at the eastern station. We moved to Loudon Station and Moorfield Station. Moorfield Station is very well entitled. Maybe they'll come in for something else someday, to be determined. On the north side, we've got Home Depot. We have Loudon Station. We have Gramercy. So some interesting things might happen there. One of the things I love about Innovation Station is that it's in Fairfax, but we get the benefit of it in Loudoun County. So with that being said, when we look at the quadrant of Toll Road and 28 with Dulles across the street, we have this entire quadrant: Old Ox to the north, 28 to the west, Toll Road to the south, Herndon to the east. We have this entire quadrant where some really grandiose things can occur. And we're here to really help ignite that. Apparently, it's not going to be a football stadium. I guess we'll see. But there's Waterside, which has obviously been zoned. DTCI's understandable quagmire with that context is what monies are reasonable and fair, and what do we do with them? And I think the answer is we've tried to, with Courtney's help, we've tried to set the proffers up so that there's flexibility. We are proposing to contribute $9.3 million to Shaw Road or Davis Drive or any other transportation improvement as reflected within 1.5 miles of our project, so that the county can be nimble and determine how to prioritize the use of those monies, frankly, as well as the monies that this commission helps secure, work closely with DTCI on the Waterside data center case to the north. Specifically, there's some $19-20 million, which those data centers have now contributed to the county well earlier than expected. So we have the benefit of some meaningful monies. We have the benefit of a number of proffers. That is, at the Waterside, the quarry proffers, there's a specific proffer commitment. So if somebody else builds a road that they're required to build, like Shaw Road, they'll have to do a reimbursement. So DTCI understandably said, we're not sure if we're going to have Shaw Road, where Shaw Road's going to be, if it's going to be Davis Drive, or if there's going to be something else. We don't know the answer yet. So we've tried to set these proffers up in a way that really gives us and the county the flexibility. We've said we're willing to go ahead and build, we're willing to design for about $1 million, 4-lane divided Shaw Road from Innovation. It's divided, right, Bob? No, not Innovation. Divided, yeah. Shaw Road is intended now to be a 4-lane divided roadway, and it's 3/4 of a mile from Innovation all the way up to Old Ox. I think that's going to be a critical improvement. My guess is that's where the monies are going to go. We can either design the road and turn the plans over to the county, or we can contribute $1 million. And then we're also going to contribute $8.3 million prior to the occupancy of our second phase. So I think the way we've structured these proffers, it really puts the county in the driver's seat to make some good and informed choices about whether they want us to design the road, contribute monies. Frankly, I think we'd give serious consideration to helping organize that consortium, which isn't a lot of people. It's us, it's the Godelski group, working in concert with DTCI, and I think we'll have some good things happen in this area. Next slide. I wanted to give you some context. So with all that being said, we're still, I think, waiting for some good feedback from Lou and Marie. We continue to believe that we're giving well more than our fair share to Shaw Road, which we admit is a really important road. Ultimately, it's not as important from our perspective to Rivanna. We believe that ultimately we'll have about 16+ of the capacity of Shaw Road. Again, it's gone from a 2-lane road to a 4-lane divided, 3/4 of a mile. So if we're at 16, 17% of the capacity of the road, both DTCI as well as Whiting Turner came up with a cost estimate of about $25.1 million to build Shaw, about $1 million to design it. That's why you see the $26.1 million figure underlined. We believe and would respectfully submit that we're contributing well more than our quote fair share, and we've continued to ask for up to about $4.9 million worth of credit for Shaw. I think this is an area where we'll take staff's and commission direction tonight. Hopefully we can reach a consensus with DTCI either this evening or perhaps between now and July. Next. Fortunately, there are not a lot of these topics, so I'll sum them up before I'm done. That's just a reflection of the pretty significant change in the existing Dulles World proffers, in essence reflected on the left. It was a 2-lane undivided road, ditch, shoulder and ditch section. We were going to terminate at the end of about where the Dulles, what's the name of the data center residential case? Right. So that terminates about there as compared to going all the way up to Old Ox. But just to give you a flavor for the changes in the CTP and the significant changes in the anticipated width of Shaw Road, which quite frankly, from our perspective, makes all the sense in the world. If you're going to have Waterside fully develop, if you're going to have something else happen on 28, ultimately, for the good of the county in this region, a wider road makes sense. Next. Checking off a bunch of the boxes, we've come to a happy conclusion on the interchange, on the right-of-way. We've just jettisoned that request for the right-of-way credit. We have come to conclusion on the right contribution at the intersection of Old Ox and Shaw Road. And we'll talk here about Innovation Avenue relocated again, which, just to remind you, before I get into it and then when I conclude, where we are now, we talked about Shaw Road. This is the issue of realigned Innovation Avenue and our previous request for about $8 million worth of credit versus the grandfathering of the existing 1265 residential units in terms of the regional road contributions, which is also, ironically, about $8 million. So let me just set the stage with that, and then we'll hopefully get some direction here this evening. Realignment of Innovation Avenue, as you guys have heard before, DTCI did not support the credit request for that. Our credit request was for about $8 million. Let's just go to the next slide. We believe that Innovation Avenue does merit consideration as, yes, it was absolutely necessary to the development of our project, we readily admit. It was on the CTP, Lou, I think this goes back to 2010, to the interjurisdictional committee recommendations, Loudon, Fairfax, Herndon, the Dulles Airport, VDOT, everyone agreed that the NASCAR raceway that was Innovation Avenue just didn't make any sense for this corner and that it ought to be straightened out. So that was done at a cost of over $11 million. Next slide. That's what it was. Interesting, made sense probably in the 80s. The real challenges from the county's perspective and this area's perspective is illuminated by the next slide. Had that stayed in place, had we not realigned it, if Davis Drive had gone through as reflected in red and you were on the south side of the toll road and for some reason wanted to get to Metro or otherwise get through that area, you basically would have driven all the way up to, at some point, made a hard right to the east toward Herndon and then had to come back, Rock Hill Road, which is its own set of challenges in terms of that road being available for Metro use. So the straightening of that road allowed for the at-grade intersection, ultimately, of Davis, if and when that's constructed, and Innovation Avenue, makes for a much better grid, opens our site up for development, opens this entire quadrant up for development. Next slide. A lot of words. Let me just cut to it. This, again, goes to the 1265 that I've now alluded to a couple of different times. Under the existing Dulles World proffers, we have about, with escalation, over $900,000 in regional road contributions that need to be made. I did want to highlight again the fact that we did build the interchange. It's the only privately funded interchange in the Route 28 corridor. I actually went to the Route 28 tax district, I think Bob and I went to see if we could get some credit for it, and they said, no thanks, we appreciate you building the interchange. Plus the Innovation Avenue realign, we're some $23.5 million. Under the proffers that are before you this evening and before staff has submitted at the end of May, we are, of course, agreeing to the $6,000 per unit for regional roads, plus $1,000 per unit for regional transit for 1266 and above. That's about close to $8.8 million. We have some $10+ million in regional transportation contributions. There are a number of cases, some of which I've worked on, whether it be Waterside or Brambleton, Concora. There is certainly precedent for the county, in essence, grandfathering previously approved residential development as we're proposing this evening. Where really the crux of it is Innovation Avenue, about an $8 million credit request, the grandfathering of the 1265, which there's certainly precedent for, about $8 million. The ownership said, we want to come back. We want to fulfill the chair's challenge to us. We're willing to drop one of those. We dropped, for purposes of the proffers that are before you, the Innovation Avenue request for credit. We think that the credit, the grandfathering of the residential units is appropriate, and there's certainly precedent for it. The other policy questions are also highlighted. We'll look forward to your guidance, hopefully this evening, and that is, of course, on the unmet housing units. Do we really impact the affordability of those units by requiring capital facilities, regional road at 6,000, regional transit at 1,000, or should those units that are under 70% of the AMI, should they be exempt from those contributions? The proffers that are before you assume, consistent with the board's decision, I think, on a number of recent cases, we are not proffering to capital facilities or regional road or regional transit for the 145 AMI units that are under 70% or less. So of the 218 units, 145 of them are under 70%. We want to keep those. That frankly helps us be able to increase as we did. All right, I'm going to wrap up here with a couple of other topics pretty quickly, and I appreciate your patience. Bicycle and pedestrian improvements next. I think we've hit that one really hard and really well. I give Marie tremendous credit. She scrutinizes every note and every connection, and we really appreciate her quality control. So we've done, I think, a really impressive job. This is an excerpt from the design guidelines of shared use paths, sidewalks, cycle tracks, bike lanes, you name it. It's now imbued in the plans and in the design guidelines. Next. They're reflected even in critical places, of course. This is that major north-south road that I alluded to earlier, where we had the depiction from Horsepen that I think is going to be so popular. Village Plaza off to the right. Next. Even the Green Promenade is a perfect location for both pedestrians and cyclists to get to and from Rivanna, of course, to Metro or to Herndon for that matter. Next. Affordable housing I've already talked about. We are up from 6.25% to 8%. You can see the delineation of the 40, 60, and 80% units. Nice bell curve there, with the great majority, of course, being under 70%. Next. Parking, I think we've made great progress. Again, credit to Teresa Miller, who I don't think is here this evening. Jackie and staff, we've been very clear now about we've simplified tremendously. We have identified the uses. We put in minimum parking requirements. Frankly, they're very well supported by the ULI shared parking methodology, which we've just taken out of the mix. More confusing than it was worth. And in fact, to their credit again, staff even made the point, well, you're talking about parking in some cases that seem to be related to Metro. You shouldn't get the benefit of that until Metro opens. Excellent point. I certainly hope it's going to be open relatively soon, but we even have a proffer that ties it either to the opening of Metro or to a shuttle system that goes to Metro. Next. NRT, with your concurrence, I just have a slide or two. We're actually doing some additional investigation. I'm really proud of the stream restoration work that WSSI is here this evening. Could answer any questions you might have. I think we might want to wait until the next session. Obviously, that's up to the desires of the commission. We'd like a little bit more feedback from DEQ. That they've been very favorable to date, to be honest about it. It would actually, if implemented the way we hope, it will result in a meaningful credit to the benefit of Loudoun County and to your MT4, your MS4 permit, which I think is about a $2 million benefit to the county. We're certainly not seeking any credit for that. Next. Stormwater management's been really scrutinized. These are excerpts from the design guidelines. Next, the CDP has a more robust stormwater management description, although quite honestly, the most significant and beneficial stormwater management that we can implement is the stream restoration plan within Horsepen. Next. Ms. Kirshner, you asked about sites. I frankly wasn't particularly familiar with it. We're doing a bunch of research. I've now perused their website at length. My understanding is there are no sites designated parcel within the Commonwealth. We might be the first. We'll see. We're learning more about it to make sure that we can comport with their high standards, as you're very well aware. I think we have a call set with them next week. Audubon Society, Wildlife Federation make good sense for us. So we haven't yet put in the proffers the detail on these elements, but we're doing that. We just need to do a little bit more investigation first. Next. Recap. Okay, so I'm not going to go through all these again. I laid out at the very beginning in slides 2 and 3 these same 2 slides. CAP facilities, land use mix, design guidelines, civic uses, the DTCI issues. Next slide. Continued DTCI, and then just the last 4 topics that I quickly touched upon. Here's my last substantive slide, almost. Go up one more for me. Again, just to highlight from the monetary perspective, we went up $26 million, just to cut to it. Next slide. Staff may have a different view. This is my perspective on what I kind of see as the big 5 or 6 topics. You all obviously may have a different view. I'm a lot more interested in what you think than what I think. But from my perspective, in synthesizing everything that's been discussed over a long period and to where we are this evening, and with the submittal of May 23rd, I kind of see about 5 or 6 topics. The park credits, Boulder Ridge in particular. If the county doesn't want Boulder Ridge, then frankly, we'd want to revisit the credits associated with Horsepen. Because we got rid of Horsepen, we got rid of the Green Promenade, we think Boulder Ridge absolutely makes sense. But if the county says, hey, we don't want that, then I'd want to revisit Horsepen. I don't think it'll come to that. I think Boulder Ridge is a jewel for the reasons I've talked about. DTCI, we have some more dialogue to undertake on clarification with regard to Shaw Road. I've now spent more time than you want on the 8 million versus 8 million. Instead of asking for 16 million, we got rid of Innovation Avenue credit request. We still think that the grandfathering of those 1265 is not only reasonable, but consistent with other similar cases. I believe that on the comprehensive plan conformance issue, particularly as a result of these really detailed design guidelines, I hope, based on the feedback we've heard to date, that we're in good shape on that front. I don't know if you want to spend a lot of time talking about it. Happy to talk about it. Never get bored about talking about our planning. And I talked about the unmet housing, where we continue to believe that in order to maintain the increase in those units, and frankly, as you all well know, this is the most expensive construction type that's going to occur in Loudoun County. It's the most expensive dirt. It's close to Metro. We're talking about, in many cases, underbuilding or underground parking, particularly in Block A, in the Village Center, and some of the surrounds. It doesn't get more expensive than that. That's urban development. And so having 218 affordable units, to me, is something that we all can take great pride in. And then the NRT, the stream restoration, that might take a little bit more time. Those, to me, are the big 6 topics. I've got only one more slide, I think. There are too many people to thank. I don't have time. I have to call out our favorite jockey there. We're very grateful to the Planning Commission for taking your time and joining us this evening. I did some good Google research on that one. And next slide. Jackie said she wouldn't peek, so I don't think she saw that before. Next and last slide. All right, I am done. I am grateful for your time. I'm going to take my glasses off. And Mr. Chair, I'd be happy to answer questions now or later, sir.
Thank you for that very thorough presentation. You know, I think before the commissioners start asking questions, I want to go to Jackie and allow you to provide the information that you might have and weigh in on any information that we have received from the applicant. Just kind of level set all of this so we can comment on everything that we've heard from both of you.
Sure, happy to do that, Chair Hayes. These are the topics that I had anticipated the commission talking about tonight. Tony did a really great job of outlining how they responded in the proffers, but I do want, or I'm seeking commission feedback tonight on the capital facilities credits, the transportation contributions, perhaps parking phasing, and we can just give a brief staff update on where we think the design guidelines are. The way that I would like to steer this conversation, and staff has, we've outlined discussions like this before for the Planning Commission, but I think it could make sense to sort of approach this as a straw poll type of questioning for these issues. And we can start with the capital facilities credits. This is what I have in my work session memo, and we can go through each credit source that the application or that the applicant is requesting. But here we have this table that the applicant is requesting this $6.5 million credit for the interchange at Innovation Avenue and Route 28. Staff can support a credit for this amount. The staff report indicates this. But we do have these two remaining credit requests that staff cannot support a credit for. And I'll start with Parkland. And while I'm sort of introducing that, I'm going to ask Mark Novak and Karen Lanham to come to the table because there are two questions as it relates to Boulder Ridge. And staff believes that this would meet the definition of a neighborhood park. But the question is, would we consider this a capital facility in which the applicant would be entitled to receive credits? And there are certain criteria in the comp plan that would that outlines what the county is looking for something to qualify as a credit. And as I explained at the public hearing, the first step in that is that the applicant has to offer to dedicate that entity, that park, that facility to the county, and the proffers do indicate that the applicant would offer to dedicate Boulder Ridge to the county. That is no longer in the proffers for the Green Promenade or Horse Pen Run. So with this submission, we are only looking at Boulder Ridge as the facility that the applicant would be dedicating to the county. And as Tony indicated, they are requesting a credit of $12.6 million. The county has stated its position is that we would not accept Boulder Ridge into the county's park system. Mark, Mr. Novak is here to answer further questions about that. We can go through that exercise of, after we speak with Mr. Novak, does the commission agree that the applicant should receive capital facilities credits for this area? And after we get the commission's feedback on that, does the commission believe a value of $12.6 million is an appropriate credit request for that land? So I'm going to stop this conversation or this topic here. If we want to talk to Mr. Novak about the parks, ask for more information about that. Again, Karen Lanham is from DTCI, and she can talk about her valuation of the land for Boulder Ridge. We had indicated before that the land for Boulder Ridge, staff's position is that's between, it's $3.9 million and $7.9 million. So that's the range that staff has in front of us now. I'll turn it over to the commission for questions, or we can do a straw poll. Chair Hayes, how would you want us to handle that? Or I could go.
Go ahead, finish your thought.
No, I'd like to.
Okay.
So
let's do this. Let's give the commissioners, if you are so inclined, at least one question each if you want to ask questions. And so let's do the questions, and then we can do the straw poll. So if you want to get some information first. So just on this topic, right? So we're going to do them one at a time. So Commissioner Frank, you have a question?
I do, Mr. Chair. I guess I'm trying to be efficient and succinct. Jackie, you said that there were it sounded like multiple things they could do under the comp plan guidance to qualify as a neighborhood park. One of them was to dedicate the land. Are there other things? Or would dedicating the land be enough?
No, so we have determined that this would meet the definition of a neighborhood park.
Okay,
In order for this to qualify as a capital facilities credit, the applicant would have to dedicate the park to the county or its designee.
okay. Okay, so I guess my second part of my question is for Parks and Recs. It sounds like you don't want this dedicated to you. Is that a correct read on the situation?
Yes, after looking at the application that came back and the discussion we had back in May, it doesn't really benefit the county to have Boulder Ridge as a neighborhood park, primarily the way it's located in what's in there. To have the public access this site, to come to this site, would really not be beneficial without the other two parks being included. Also, the concern of just bringing county staff out there to maintain a 4-acre parcel that's basically enclosed makes it difficult based on where it's located. So we have decided that this park, while it does qualify as the neighborhood park based on the standards of the acreage, we feel it's not really advantageous for us to accept it as a county facility.
But I don't like to assume. What you said earlier, though, in that statement, Mr. Novak, would you consider it if you were taking all 3 parcels, if they were still on the table as being dedicated to the county?
Yeah, originally, that's kind of where we were
Okay, so it's more,
thinking.
then it's it's
Yes,
worth
ma'am.
your effort, I guess is what I'm gonna, okay. All right, thank you.
Commissioner Barnes.
Yes, I have just a very small question. All of these facilities that you're building in that project is to benefit the project, people, those who are going to live there, right? And the necessity, the roads that you're going to build is to serve your project. And the Boulder thing is also to serve your project. I don't think anybody from outside is going to travel up there into this area and use that. So I think it's not fair for the county, or I would say taxpayers, to pay for it, like the staff said. And I don't think that this is for the project. And I think you ought to keep it as a project, serving the project. Also the road stuff that you're talking about, you have to build it to build that project. So you have to have roads coming to it and going out of it, and traffic. That's the benefits for your project. And I think we are going on the wrong way on this, that the people of county have to put the bill on it or take the charge. So that's where I'm going, but you can change my mind, later on.
I'd like to try. Mr. Barnes, a couple quick thoughts, if I may, Mr. Chair. Would you like me to comment now or wait?
Let's wait. Well, you know what? I'll take it back. So the questions can be responded to by either the staff or the applicant. So go right ahead.
Mr. Barnes, very quickly, we respectfully disagree. This is not just built for the benefit of the project. In fact, in many ways, it's deleterious to the project. It would be a lot more valuable for us to put residential development there, which we're allowed and entitled to do. We intentionally reduced significantly the density in that quadrant of the property to create something meaningful. Will it help our project? Absolutely. Does it make it more attractive? Absolutely. Will it help attract office developers, inspire the restaurants in the village center? It will, and that inures to the benefit of the underlying taxes of the county, the basic taxes, the Route 28 tax, the rail tax. Most importantly, I would say this: we are designing both Boulder and Horsepen to make it a Loudon to make it a Loudon project. We want anyone and everyone from Loudon, and of course people from Fairfax and other places, are going to happily come here. So it's not just designed for the project. I don't think the county's footing the bill. Just to be clear, I said it before, we would build all the amenities within that park, and we will be responsible at our cost not at Mr. Novak's cost, not at the county's cost, for maintaining it. Of course, the parks will come in, and if they see something that they think we're not doing correctly, they can let us know. But this would not be a maintenance cost for the county, just to be clear.
Vice Chair Solomon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Questions for staff, and this might be a moot point after my second question, but I'm going to ask it first anyway. For Boulder Ridge, the applicant got an appraisal at $12.6 million. They used a certified appraiser that the county says, we agree that the appraisals from those appraisers are good. They use them. They could have used me. I would have pulled a number that's different, but they used a certified county appraiser. And so the county came back and said, well, no, it's really a third to two-thirds of that. Can you tell me why we wouldn't just accept the appraisal of the county-approved appraiser versus we came up with a much, much, much lower number? Can we maybe discuss why that is?
Yes, sir. Typically, when we have like more simpler project where an applicant is just proposing a ball field or something, it's much easier to get an appraised value, and they give us the cost estimate for constructing the ball field. So it's a much more concrete number. In this case, there are not that many transit-oriented developments in Loudon at this point, so the appraiser had to go and get sales comparisons from Washington, D.C., and also Silver Spring, Maryland, which, when I checked the available comps, there are very few, so he did have to do that. He discounted those slightly, but I would say that Loudon does not equate to the same values as Washington, D.C., and Silver Spring at this time. To give you an idea of, in DTCI we review appraisals all the time because of our transportation projects. So to give you an idea of some of the other types of values that we've seen recently in the county, multifamily residential is about $60 a square foot. Data center land is about $45 a square foot, and light industrial is about $17 a square foot. And so, the highest we've seen is about 60 or 65. The appraiser has come in with $131 a square foot, which we feel is just very excessive. And there's no comps in Loudon or the immediate area to support that value. The other thing, when he was doing his calculations, he did it on the whole residential portion. And in this zoning district, they have to, I believe, reserve a 50% area. They don't get credit for the whole entire area. So what we did is we cut his value of $131 down to $78.68. But then the other thing that you have to look at is appraisals are looking at whether, so the county, we're looking at just the Boulder Ridge portion.
Correct.
So you have to look at whether the development is physically possible, whether it's financially feasible. So when you just look at that Boulder Ridge section, it's questionable in my mind whether you could build, multifamily on those Boulder areas. So for this reason, we further discounted the amount and arrived at somewhere between like $19 and $40 a square foot. Originally, I gave Jackie the range of about 3.9 million to 7.8 million. And again, we're just looking at the 4-acre park parcel that the county would be receiving. Right. So for that reason, this is why we discounted what the appraiser showed.
Okay, thank you. The next question, I think, is to Tony, which is, what I heard Mark say is if you were to dedicate to the county all three parks, then the county may be interested in accepting the parks into the system. Did I get that right, Mark? Okay. And so the question to the applicant is, would you be willing to do that? And just because I also heard you say you were going to pay to maintain them already, I would think that we would probably want the money too. But we'll start with the first question, which was, would you be willing to dedicate all three to the county?
In the spirit of compromise, as charged by the Planning Commission when last we met, when we were trying to work things out, we in fact had proposed in the proffers up to that point to dedicate Horsepen and the Green Promenade and Boulder Ridge either to the county or ultimately, for example, if there's a CDA. So that language was clear. Our view was we needed some reasonable credit for it because, Mr. Barnes, to your good question, none of those, literally none of them, but are exclusively for the benefit of Rivanna. They absolutely are intended for a broader audience. I would say that I'll make a couple points because I think it's important to your earlier question, Mr. Salmon, if I may. If it is the direction of the Planning Commission that you want us to reconsider the conveyance to the county or the CDA of all three of those, we're absolutely, the ownership's here, they'll be happy to consider that. We would say that the valuation of those is back on the table and we're going to have a healthy discussion about how much each of those should be valued. We tried to simplify and jettison. And Jackie, can you pull up slide 63 of my PowerPoint because I think it's important. Because I do want to respond to your first question, the valuation. So we have thoroughly vetted this. The $131 that the appraiser came back with, and I can't remember if it was he or she, Karen, I'm drawing a blank on who from Myers did it, but they had to vet other things. There are no other projects like what we're proposing in Loudon. We've all said that. I mean, there are similar things at One Loudon. There's apartments, obviously, at Loudon Station. But when you're talking about true transit-oriented mixed-use development of the ilk that is before the Planning Commission this evening, you have to look outside of Loudon because it doesn't really exist in Loudon. So that's a fair and appropriate way to do an appraisal. The appraiser came back at $131 per foot. Karen's absolutely right. We looked at that number. That number over 4 acres, I did the calculations. It's always dangerous when I do math, but at 131 over 4 acres, that's $26 million. We looked at that figure and said, that probably doesn't really make sense for Loudon to expect $26 million for 4 acres, as unique and as appropriate and as attractive as we think these 4 acres will be. So we voluntarily cut that in half, and that's why we're at 12.5 instead of at 23, or whatever the total. So we dropped it to $65 a foot. I would say, as reflected here, we don't think it's appropriate. Yeah, there are rocky conditions. Ms. Frank and I live in a neighborhood where every time a swimming pool is built, what do we hear? We hear the big old drills in the back of our yards because they're trying to build a swimming pool because there's rock everywhere. That's why there's a quarry here. So we know we can build on that property, and we're in fact entitled to build on that property. And I get and understand. I think where we were and not where we are this evening. I think where we were was very significant demands on Horsepen, on Boulder, on Promenade, and the staff doing what it's supposed to do, which is protect the best interests of the county and, be questioning about all of it. I think we are now at a point where we said, we've cut Boulder Ridge by 50%. I don't think you're going to get another 4 acres like that. Even if the Park Authority doesn't want it, the CDA the county can use it in any way that we want. We're going to have to improve it. We're going to have to maintain it. That will not be a burden. And is this typical of parks? Absolutely not. Is this something unique and different? It absolutely is. I've been at this Planning Commission many times, Mr. Merrithew as well, where we were questioning the school board staff and saying, you can only have these one type of prototype for schools. You got to come up with something urban. You got to come up with something new. That's what this is. This is an urban park where it's supposed to be. So we respectfully submit that the valuation, which is half of what we propose, is absolutely fair, particularly when we're jettisoning the rest. I personally think it goes down a rabbit hole to revisit all of them, But the way that, if you want us to revise the proffers to leave it up to the county to determine whether it wants to accept horse pen or green promenade, that's no problem. I don't think that's the right thing to do, but that's up to you, not me.
Yeah, okay, so thank you for that, Tony. And I think based on your comments, I think you're right. I think we should not work with DTCI to bring the other two parks in. But what that tells me is that Boulder Ridge shouldn't be in at all because without the two, they shouldn't be in.
Mr. Vice Chair.
Yes, sir?
You're out of order. You got to ask questions. You can't give your opinion.
I was, okay, very well, thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Miller.
Thank you. Commissioner Salmon asked my question about, one of my questions about the bringing other parks in. But Jackie, we don't believe the credit of $12.6 million for Boulder Ridge is appropriate. But do we believe that a $3.9 to $7.8 million credit would be appropriate? In other words, we're saying this number isn't right, but is there a number that would be appropriate?
So that's what we're seeking commission feedback on.
Okay.
If the commission doesn't believe that $12.6 million would be an appropriate credit, what would be an appropriate credit? Staff has given our position that we believe the land would be worth between $4 and $8 million.
And so my question is, if we as a body, no, I don't have to ask it this way, because of course we as a body decide when we decide to do something. If in staff's negotiation with the applicant, a number of between 4 and 7.8 million came up, would we not, would you be presenting us a different question right now?
I'm not going to answer your question. I want to say something before that is when we were considering accepting Horse Pen Run, I believe the top range that we had indicated in our staff report that we thought the land was worth was $500,000. So we, at that time, said a credit of $500,000 would be appropriate. I think in this case, we could say if that high end is $7.8 million, maybe that would be appropriate.
Okay. Okay.
We just have ranges right now, and
Right.
it's hard for us to narrow it down to one number.
So,
Fair enough.
just a point of, I guess, point of information. So, Jackie, I think when we get to that place, I'm saying this now so you can have some time to consider it. It would be helpful if you think about how you're going to frame the question that we'll put before the commission for the straw poll.
This is the question. The two questions right now are, does the commission agree that the applicant should receive capital facilities? That's what I'm, yes or no from the commissioners. If the answer is yes, do we think that $12.6 million is an appropriate amount?
Okay, and if the answer were to be no,
No.
The answer can be no, or it can be no, but we think this could be an appropriate request.
but if the answer is no, then what's the number? So we still have to have a way to get to the number. Just saying no does not give us the ultimate answer.
Okay, so.
That's what I'm trying to get to.
Okay, so staff is saying that we believe this land is worth between $3.9 million and $7.8 million. When we analyzed the request for Horse Pen Run to be, or when the applicant was proposing to receive capital facilities credits for Horse Pen Run, we said staff could support a credit request for that land of $500,000 because that was the maximum number that we thought that land was worth. So in this case, the commission, I think it could be appropriate that the commission could say $7.8 million.
So I think so let me ask you this. So would it be, in order to give a clear choice, either $12.643 $1,726 is the number, or the range that the staff is presenting
Yes,
is what?
Yes.
So that's the either or.
yes.
So we should be presented that way. Do you think that or that? And not just, is this yes or no? Got it?
Well, the first question actually is a yes or no. The first question is,
Okay, the 12. But then it's also a yes or no on the second
Actually,
one?
no, that's not the first question.
No, Mr.
First
Chairman,
question
the
is
first question
yes or no.
is a
No,
yes
no,
or no.
I'm past the first question. I got that. I'm to the numbers now.
okay,
Right.
so yes to what you just said.
Okay, all right. I just want to make sure we don't have confusion when we actually are taking the poll.
Okay,
Okay, because, right? So I know the first question is not about numbers. When we get to the numbers, it should be an either or,
okay,
right? Their number or your range.
yes.
Okay, all right. Now,
And if-
Commissioner Cushing.
Can I
Oh, you're not done? You get
no, because you asked for a point of clarification in the middle of my
I do apologize.
Statement.
I'm sorry. I
Conversation.
thought
Good
you were done.
strategic move.
Go right ahead, Commissioner. I apologize.
So, okay, it's okay. So now that did answer my question, hopefully everyone's else's question as well. I would say that I don't, if we take a straw poll on this, I'm not sure I'm ready to make that decision because this is not the only, none of these credit opportunities are independent of each other. There's a lot that goes on here, and there are other questions that will come up through the course of these discussions that would cause me to support whether or not there should be a credit here, and if so, how much. So I just wanted to make that sort of statement comment. This is what I was going to continue with, because I recognize valuations. I also recognize that while the county thinks that this particular appraiser overestimated things because we have nothing comparable to it, that's exactly the heart of it, is that we have nothing comparable to it, and there can be nothing comparable to this much land at the intersection of two major highways across the street from an airport with a metro rail station. It simply doesn't exist in Loudoun County. So if this is, as Commissioner Salmon said, an appraiser that valued it accurately, and we are in favor of giving a credit, then we would have to probably look at the overarching uniqueness of this project in such a way that this is the only shot. There is no other way to look at this, because this, like I said, it's this much land across the street from the airport on the metro rail. So I would generally think that if it was a straw poll, I'd still want more information about other things that are interrelated before I say yes to giving them between $4 and $12 million credit and other things that might occur with this project.
Mr. Chair, I have a suggestion, not a question. I think if what Jackie said, if we are going to say yes, we want to do it, or no, we don't want to do it. So that comes first. If we say no, we don't want to do it, the numbers are moot. Then it doesn't matter what the number is if we decided not to give the credit for it. You know what I'm saying?
Mike.
You're right, Mr. Barnes. You're right. Okay, Commissioner Kirshner?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question for Parks and Rec. I think it was already answered, but I want to hear this. Have you ever had accepted a property before where it's maintained by the developer?
No, we haven't, and that would probably be an issue.
Okay, and is that part of the reason why, does that play into how you feel
I
about
was
this?
unaware that they were offering to maintain it.
Okay.
What was the question again?
If Parks and Rec has ever accepted a property before that was maintained by the developer, which is what the commitment,
And
what
you
I
said,
heard.
Mr. Novak, you haven't?
Yeah, okay. And then I guess my other question too I'm just looking at the design guidelines and the description of Boulder Ridge, and it says forested green space that honors Loudon's rich forested spaces, responsive, blah, blah, I will preserve and incorporate natural boulders, vestiges of remarkable past, and will protect the existing tree canopy in its design. So is there a significant portion of this that is going to be protected or restored natural areas? And I'm going to talk more about that. I'm going to have more questions when we get talking about natural resources and NRT stuff, but just for this discussion.
Yes, there's quite a bit of tree conservation that will occur there. As you know, having toured it yourself, Ms. Kirshner, it needs some meaningful cleanup, and we would proffer to work with the urban forester to identify species that ought to be removed, that are invasive, what ought to be cleaned up. So there's quite a bit of tree canopy that's going to remain within Boulder for sure.
And if I can just ask one more follow-up on that. So then there's going to be like natural plant communities that are to remain, intact, to protect those habitat areas and the.
Yes.
So about what percentage do you think that is?
I don't think we've done a percentage of that yet.
I mean, guess. I mean, anybody have a guess?
The tree preservation area is at least 30 to 40%.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Matthew.
Mark, I'm interested in, and maybe this is to you as well as capital facilities. I recall there being other criteria for accepting property as a capital facility, that being that it's part of the county CIP or there's a need for the park. These are unique sites, but do any of these sites fulfill an identified need in the CIP or an identified need in your long-range plans?
We did identify Horsepen Run as being a CNA facility that would satisfy or meet that need. Boulder Ridge is a little different. All three, based on that area where we have very little parkland and open space, would be of interest to the county as a potential CNA fulfillment.
As primarily trails and natural area, correct?
With the new LPAT program that's been approved by the board, the Stream Valley corridors are our #1 priority, and then we branch out into the trail systems. So all three parks would have to have a connectivity that would show that it is a connection for the trail system.
That was my next question. It seems like there's at least two distinct facilities here, maybe three distinct facilities that are not connected from what I've seen. So it really doesn't benefit you from a maintenance perspective or an economy of scale perspective because they seem quite distinct. But you're saying collectively it would be maintainable or reasonable for you to maintain those properties? I guess I'm not making much sense on that question, but they would have to, are they interconnected the way you feel they need to be?
They're interconnected in regards that the way they're set up, and if you saw the illustration, Horsepen Run does connect over to Boulder Ridge. The predominant, which is down farther, is more of a trail connection, but it does have open space. It is green, so we would include that as a linear park in our system.
Jackie, do you happen to know what the other criteria are for capital facilities proffer like this?
Yes. Okay, so we talked about the proffered facility has to be dedicated to the count or some other type of public authority. The credit has to be based on the service needs of the county. The contribution has a quantifiable value. The value of land contributed for public use is recognized as a capital facility proffer. Land for county facilities should be dedicated to the county. This is about cash. So that's...
All right, thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I just had a few questions. So, am I to understand, the only appraisal that we have to work with was ordered and put forward by the applicant? Did the county do its own appraisal?
No, we did not. We evaluated the applicant's appraisal.
So it's not standard protocol that we also do our own appraisal?
I don't think so.
No?
Ms. Lanham? No.
No, that's not. Okay.
the appraiser was from a list of the county's acceptable appraisers, is that right?
That's correct, and we use Mr. Myers all the time, and he's a very good appraiser.
So let me make sure, obviously I'm new to this in Loudon. So we have a bench of appraisers and we make them known to the applicant and then they choose them and they pay them to do the work? Is that how it works? Okay. And they came back with, they set the market at $131 a square foot,
Which we cut in half, yes, sir.
but you cut it half. And so, so then you discuss it, and ma'am, I'm sorry, your name.
Karen Lanham.
Okay, Ms. Lanham. So then you discussed a formula, I'll say generously, but a methodology that you use to then further reduce the square footage. And how did you come by that formula?
So when we're looking at just the 4 acres for Boulder Ridge, if we're going to apply that highest value of, full development potential, we have to make sure that it meets all the criteria for highest and best use. It has to be legally permissible, it has to be physically possible, it has to be financially feasible. And so when I look at that and I see all those boulders, it's a question in my mind about whether it's physically possible on that 4 acres and also financially feasible to build that high-density development. So this is why we discounted it further.
So, but how do those factors that are related to constructability and development programming, how do they translate into, economics and the value of the property? Like what is the scale that you use to make these numerical determinations?
So if the county were to, purchase that land to build a park, we would conduct our own appraisal, we would get due diligence, we would have engineering studies, and we would have a lot more information that would guide our decision about how much the property is worth. Because we don't have all those types of things, we just had to make some estimates with regard to how difficult it might be to build around the Boulder area. So we just used, I think we discounted it by about 50%.
Now, I apologize for somewhat belaboring this point. You have to forgive me, I'm a real estate person. But you would need all those technical ingredients to make that kind of a property valuation conclusion. You'd have to have that kind of information to as the substance behind the conclusions that you've drawn. I mean, for example, even though the number that they started with is kind of based on thin air because there is no market, right? So there is no market. There are no comps, so to speak. That's that's really a pejorative term because, we're talking about a commercial piece of property, but that there is no like piece of property anywhere around here. But I'm sure the appraiser, just like a broker would, tried his best to find some kind of a way to pin their hat on what the market might be like. But then their formula is very simple. They just say, we cut it in half. So I'm going to leave it there. The other questions are for Mr. Novak. So if they were to contribute all three, no, I'm sorry, I'm going to turn back to the applicant. So if you contributed all three parks or pieces of property to Parks and Rec, you said that you would maintain them, and you said that you previously offered that. Is that correct?
Just to be clear, in order to get cap facilities credit, the county or its designee would ultimately need to be the owner, as Ms. Sidnor would confirm. We have in our proffers that we would dedicate Boulder Ridge to either the county, or we've continued to talk about different financing mechanisms, the Community Development Authority, which is a county arm. So it wouldn't be in private ownership's concern to partially address Ms. Kirshner's good comment. So the county, in essence, would not be responsible. I just want to make it clear, the county will not be responsible for ongoing maintenance. We certainly understand and respect that this is a unique attribute. It's not a typical park. It's not a ball field. It certainly is developable, even with the rocky conditions. I think we'd still very much like to try and keep this simple. I think rather, at least from our perspective, Mr. Chair, rather than revisit whether any or all three go to the county, we continue to believe that Boulder Ridge has been designated or could be considered a neighborhood park and therefore satisfy that requirement. And at least from our perspective, the real question is what would be a reasonable value? Obviously, it's up to the Board of Supervisors whether they want to put it, Mr. Merithew's question, in the CIP. There's no specific neighborhood park in the CIP at that location, as you know. But this is, from my perspective, as we talked about earlier, when you look at the universe of properties that are available to the county to create something like this, that's this close to Metro, less than half a mile, I think this is probably our last opportunity, other than if Moorfield comes back in and does something different. So
Okay, well then let's back up.
Yes, sir.
Because so what I hear you saying is the concept of not contributing, but assigning all three to the ownership of the county is now off the table. You want to continue to talk about Boulder Ridge.
I don't think anything's off the table. I think we were trying to listen to your and the commission's direction to come up with reasonable, deliverable solutions. We're so far apart on Horsepen. If we're far apart on Boulder, we're way far apart on Horsepen and what the valuation is. So at least from our perspective, I would respectfully submit that the simplest solution would be consideration of Boulder, ultimately by the county, by the board, and by for inclusion. And we think it's really a question of valuation. Again, just to be clear, Karen's uppermost valuation was $60 per foot. Ours was $65 per foot. We're just not that far apart.
That's right. So I think I hear what you're saying. So let's just focus on Boulder Ridge. If we can work out the terms and methodology evaluation on that one, then maybe it can be applied to the other three, but just focus on this one first. Okay, so let's talk about the other parts of it. But you are proffering that you would maintain it, right?
Yes, sir.
So then that satisfies any issues related to Parks and Rec and their maintenance apparatus having to access the site, as Mr. Novak mentioned earlier, right?
Yes, sir.
My other question is, had you intended for this park, other parks, other parts of the overall footprint to employ a private operator to activate and program the space for the use of the residents and visitors?
Absolutely. That's a critical element of every part of what is before you.
I think that's a big deal. What other aspects of the overall development program include components that could be reasonably termed as a partnership with the county? Not a financial partnership, but a partnership that
like
benefits.
programming, for example?
Programmatic.
Yeah, that's a
partnership.
great question. So I don't know that I'm going to let Tristan come up to the microphone, but this is imbued in the other projects that we quickly reviewed when last we met. Placemaking and having really intense programming We can pull up some examples if you'd like, but I don't want to get us sidetracked. Is absolutely essential to this ownership. That's in no small part why they're part of this ownership on this site. And that's in no small part why we wanted Boulder Ridge and why we want Horsepen and the village. Because to Mr. Barnes' question, this is really not, if you're just about what's within the project itself, you don't need that much programming. I'll talk about Reston for a second because I'm familiar with it, having done it and having my office in Reston. Probably all of you have been to, Reston has summer concert series, they have the dog events, they have the art and cultural stuff, they have the farmers markets, they do all that. Is that just for the residents of Reston Town Center? Absolutely not. I live in Ashburn, we go there all the time. But better is what we want to do here. So there's tremendous opportunity for collaboration with the county, with charitable events, with laudable organizations, with the art folks, you name it. So all of that is imbued within the thinking and is really on us. That will not be a county expense.
Thank you. I just wanted to tease that out so everyone could see this in context. And we've been narrowly focused on this one pocket park as opposed to seeing it as a piece of a whole.
Yeah.
Okay, that's all I got. Mr. Murphy, you want one more?
I just need a clarification. Does Parks and Rec see dedication of the park to the county, but maintenance by the whatever HOA, POA organization a benefit and a cost-effective move, or is it an issue for you? Because as you said earlier, I don't think you've ever done it before.
It would be an interesting venture because, as I said, typically when the conveyance to the county for parkland, it goes into our inventory, and then we would maintain and program it. So this would be different. The closest that we have to this kind of park would be Evermore Park, which is in Moorfield Station. It's in a high-density area. They don't maintain it, but they have asked us to keep it to the standards that attract the high income to that area. So this would be a little different in that if we own the land, what would we do? I mean, I'm a little confused because having it conveyed to the county as parkland, we get the 4 acres that goes into our inventory, but it sounds like I'm hearing it would be a partnership with the applicant to maintain it, program it, which would kind of probably work to some degree, but we've never done that, and I don't know how that would work in the big picture.
I would be curious understanding the liability of the county to have somebody else maintain and program the facility. Programming, which is basically coordinating what happens on the site, is one thing, but maintenance and maintaining a standard of maintenance is something else. And so the liability question is something I'd be interested in.
Okay, so we're, did you get your answer?
It'll come to me.
Okay, so we're gonna have Commissioner Frank, and then I've got one last question, and then we are going to go back to Jackie to tee up the straw poll. Okay, Commissioner Frank.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Two quick, I hope quick things. This 4.5 acres is currently entitled to be developed as what?
I believe it would be the town center area for the hub. It's almost, I don't want to say it's almost the same. Tony, do you want to talk more about it?
No, I think that's right. High-density office
Okay.
and residential.
So high-density
use.
office and residential, there is no office factored into this analysis that we have from Karen and the DTCI team. We have multifamily residential, data center land, light industrial. What do we have different sets of numbers for high-density office, or do those not exist really? We don't really have a lot of high-density office.
Right, we don't have a lot of, mixed use or urban transit-oriented mixed-use development. So these are some of the higher values that we see in the county, so that's why I use those numbers.
Well, here's where my real estate background, I guess, gets me in trouble or helps. You guys can decide, and I'll let you each come to your own conclusion. So I look at it as if you take the entire project and you look at the tax assessed value, now you can't pull out 4.5 acres, right? We have giant parcels. And you look at that being $43.37 per square foot. That's a tax assessed value. In my world, almost everything sells for more than the tax assessed value. That's typical. When it doesn't, it's a very, very big exception to the rule. So I look at that data, the entitlement, and I know we can't pull that 4.5 acres out, but that's, I mean, that's 4337. Is that the number? I'm hoping I'm doing math right. As far as the tax assessed value of a square foot. Okay. Okay, I guess that's what I needed. Thank you.
I just had one question. This is for the applicant. So if, in fact, the county granted you the $12,643,726 credit, what is that offsetting?
Capital facilities contribution, sir.
And what would you do with that savings?
It's all rolled into the summary that I reviewed earlier. We
Can you
went
just
from
tell me for the record?
Yes, sir. Of
Nobody
course.
at home is reading.
We're at 35. We're at $35.6 million net contributions, which cover both capital facilities and regional road. I'll have to parse out which is which.
But there's no free money in a development budget, so then you would reinvest that into what? Where would that go in the pro forma?
Every aspect of what's before you. We have tens of millions of dollars of infrastructure costs, parking, landscaping, stream restoration, you name it.
But you don't know where that would go specifically? Okay.
It'll
just go back in the kitty. Okay. Got it. That makes sense. Okay. All right, Jackie, how would you like us to proceed?
I can ask the question. The commission has heard a lot of debate this evening from staff and from the applicant, so we will pose this question to the commission. Does the commission think this land is worth a capital facility credit?
Yep, so I'll tell you what, we'll just let Jackie read the questions. She's got them in front of her. And as opposed to, aye and yay, let's just raise our hands, and then that way she can count from where she is, right?
Sure. That works? Or
Is that okay? I'm looking at Courtney.
Yeah, this is just a straw poll?
Yeah.
Right? So you're just asking?
Not a vote.
That's fine.
Mr. Chairman, there's been, and I'm sorry, I need some clarification. The square foot numbers seem to float from what Karen brought up at 60 or 65, I forget, 60 as your number, and then
65 was ours.
and then the applicant proposed 70, 75?
No,
Well,
sir.
our, Mr. Merrithew, our number was somewhere between $19.67 and $39.34.
39.
Yeah. The assessment is $43.
Okay,
Is that the price per square foot, or are you talking about?
yeah.
Well, she was talking about the tax per square foot.
The price per square foot,
You just said
or
three
the
different numbers.
assessment.
Appraisal to assess.
The assessment, based on the assessment,
The tax assessment,
yes.
and where did you get that from? Is that from Mr. What's our tax?
No, it's on our tax records, on the property tax
Okay,
records.
all right. So why did you? I'm sorry. I get overly excited, so please forgive me. You just said three different numbers, though. Which one is the tax assessment number?
$43 a square foot.
Okay, thank you.
And what was your valuation?
Somewhere between $19.67 and $39.34.
And what is the applicant's,
The initial appraisal came in at $131 per square foot. We cut that in half. We're at $65 per square foot.
65? I thought I
Correct.
heard 70 something.
No, sir.
So 65.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. I mean, I think that's the number as opposed to yay or nay on 12 or 7, but I don't know.
Well,
True.
yeah. Yeah, so let's let Jackie do it, but I hear what you're saying, John. Yeah, I hear what you're saying. That's what I think the applicant was trying to point out. They're pretty close on that final, but we need to go through the process. Did you have something else?
Yeah, just a quick question. I mean, will we be able to give a opinion before we cast our straw vote as to why we feel the way we do? We haven't,
No.
okay, because in asking our questions, we weren't able to really get into, okay.
Yeah. We just
Can I-
gotta, okay, Jackie,
Can I have one clarification from Jackie before I say yes or no?
you can ask a question.
Okay. See,
You can't give your
the
opinion.
county, actually, Michelle can answer me better than that because she's in real estate. $43 assessment, generally, the assessment is about 80% of the real, is it what it is? I don't know.
No.
No.
Oh, what is it?
The,
Yeah, you tell me.
Mr. White's goal is to assess land values in Loudoun County, improved or unimproved, at what they believe to be 100% of their value. However, there are two different classifications of real estate in Loudoun County, that which is deemed for residential and that which is deemed for commercial.
Okay.
Sometimes in a hyper-volatile real estate market, you can have values that far exceed the assessor's value, which is simply a snapshot in a point of time in January. Commercial properties function differently than residential properties relative to their assessed values.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, now we really are gonna have the straw poll. Jackie, if you would, put the question to us.
Would you like me to ask the question again? Does the commission
No, please put the question.
agree that the applicant should receive capital facilities for Boulder Ridge? Okay.
Count it out.
Okay, so 6.
So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Count in the affirmative.
Okay. Is $12.6 million an appropriate request from the applicant for capital facilities credits? You've heard the applicant's reasoning why they believe this is worth $12 million. You've heard county staff's response.
Yes. That's,
Okay, yes, does
you
the
agree,
commission believe $12.6 million is appropriate?
Can I just ask a question? Are you going to give different values and then people are just going to vote on different values? Or you,
No.
I'm
I know.
curious as to
I know.
what our opportunities
that
are.
depends. First, you have to just vote on this. Everybody says yes. So,
Okay.
whoa. Just have to vote, not vote. You have to respond to the question that's being asked at the moment. Then we'll take another step depending upon what happens now. So it's either yes or no
Okay, so it's
to this one.
So it's just yes or no on the 12.
Yes or no to the 12.
Okay.
You asked if it's inappropriate.
Is it
Okay.
appropriate? Right.
No,
Okay, so
No, she's asking, do you think it is an appropriate request?
Yes.
Yeah.
$12.6 million.
Yes.
Okay.
Will we settle for that? I don't know, but it is appropriate.
Jackie, ask the question again so you make sure they're clear.
Okay, I don't want to use, Mr. Miller used the word settle.
Not settle, but
I'm sorry, can I just say something here? Maybe this helps. 12.6 million is what they have in their proffers, right?
Yes.
That's their offer. And
Right.
so ultimately, at the end of the day, you're going to vote on the full application as presented by the applicant. So right now, you're basically pulling out an element of what they've presented and saying, do you agree with what they have presented? If you don't agree with what they've presented, then you would go on. But she's posing the question now because it's basically, are you agreeing with what they're offering you, if that
Right, like,
helps?
do we accept that number or not? And if we do accept it, we're done. If we don't accept it, we keep going. So that's what you're not voting, that's what she's taking a straw poll on. We're not voting, we're taking a straw poll. Okay, so let's do it again. So if you,
Does the
willing to
commission
accept this.
support the applicant's request of $12.6 million for capital facility credit for Boulder Ridge? Okay. 7-2. The higher end of the county's response to the appraisal was $7.8 million. Is that a number that the commission
12, 643, 725?
would?
Is point of clarification.
Point of clarification, Jackie, can you calculate what the number is at $43 per square foot, which is the assessed value that the county assesses this property at?
$8,428,860.
8.4,
Yeah,
okay.
approximately.
But let's say for the record, the square footage of the site.
4.5 acres.
No. Say the actual square footage of the site. for
Is it,
people
if
who-
it's exactly 4.5 acres, then it's
Which translates into how many square feet?
196,020 square feet.
Okay.
To be clear, sorry, it's 4 acres. It's not 4.5.
4 acres, okay.
4 acres.
And 4 acres,
Okay, then it's going to be
175,000 square feet times
4337.
$43.37 equals,
$7,556,788.80.
okay, slow down.
Are you sure?
The people,
$7.55 million.
we have citizens watching at
I know,
home.
I'm saying,
You,
7.55 million.
you're talking like my 10-year-old daughter say, she talks so fast.
I'm just trying to speed things along.
Okay. Can you say it, Commissioner Frank?
Yeah, that's, I mean, now that we're talking 4 acres, not 4.5, not sure, sorry if I led people astray there. Question about process here. Now, if somebody's voted for 12, they can also vote that they'd be okay
Yeah.
with 7.9, correct? They've not given up their one and only vote.
Yes.
Thank you.
They have not. Okay. So Jackie, can you say this final number again?
I know.
That number didn't come from me. That came from
No,
Mr.
this is the
Mr.
number
Chair,
we
can I
want.
say something here to really clarify this? The county park doesn't want it. The way it's set up, they don't want it.
But, we're done with the first, but the county, you mean the staff?
Staff, I mean, they're telling us that
Right,
they
but.
don't
the-
want it
but-
if
right,
we're gonna
but that-
maintain it.
But if we were just gonna do what staff wanted, we wouldn't have to have a commission. That's why we're here.
No, I'm just saying if the
Right.
county doesn't want it, I'm just talking about they don't want to own it.
I know they don't want to, but we're here because we're giving our opinion tonight. Right, the staff made their
We're
opinion
gonna
known.
force them on it? I
They
don't know.
made their opinion known, so that's what we're here for. Okay. So let's just use Jackie's number. Jackie, can you say your number again, please?
As the DTCI range that Ms. Lannon provided went from $3.9 million to $7.8 million.
Okay.
That could be another figure that the commission could consider, is the higher end of this land value from a county position. We believe that the most it could be worth is $7.8 million. That's our position.
So the question would be, are we willing to provide a credit at the highest of this range?
Yes.
The number at the highest of this range. And so all those in favor, in the context of this straw poll, please raise your hand. You got to vote for something.
I can abstain. No,
The rest of you are abstaining?
No.
No, I'm talking, I know you. You abstaining?
No, they haven't gotten a no yet. You haven't asked them if they're voting.
Say what?
We have to vote on this number?
Yeah, you got to, you're giving yourself, it's not a vote, it's a straw poll.
Right. Right.
No, this is it.
Right. Right now, you're voting for yes. You ask for who those in favor. They're raising their hand. When you ask for no, they'll raise their hand then.
We say no, so we don't raise it.
Okay, so at 7.8.
So you don't want to give them 7 to 8. Okay. What's the count?
No, we haven't finished the vote.
No, if you didn't vote yes.
I believe
you
it's
voted no.
4 with Mr. Miller abstaining.
If you didn't vote yes, you voted no. You new to this?
I'm abstaining from a number at this point because there are other factors that are involved for me in what the developer's total contribution to capital facilities fee would be.
Okay.
And so that's why I'm not prepared to vote for a number below $12.6 million.
Just as a point of information, this is not a vote.
Right.
And because it's not a vote, you are not necessarily abstaining, but you choose not to participate in the straw poll.
Fair enough.
Right, so we were taking a straw poll, just a show of hands to indicate support. So, but respectfully, you have the right to not participate.
Right.
Okay, but your lack of participation or someone else's decision not to raise their hand indicates that they don't support this particular item.
I would
Right.
disagree with that.
The number, they don't support the number.
Right, I would disagree with that. That's why I would abstain from a straw poll, even from a straw poll.
It's a
But-
straw poll, right? Okay.
Could I ask
So-
the commissioners that were supportive of the $7.8 million, could I ask those commissioners to raise their hands again?
Now, if you supported the 12 and it didn't pass, that doesn't mean you can't support this. Okay. I mean, that's just a point of information. Like, you obviously want them to get something.
5. 5, okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I think we're done with that, right? 'Cause I-
To the degree
So what we're going to take away
To the degree that
tonight
the
is the commission is supportive of the applicant receiving capital facilities credits for Boulder Ridge in the amount of $7.8 million.
Yes.
That is, generally speaking, that is the consensus of the commission.
That's the consensus at this time. That is not obviously a vote, but yes.
Correct.
So may I ask a point of, I had the benefit of having multiple conversations with Jackie about this, so I apologize, maybe we could have laid this out better. I think the intent and hope from this evening is that the commission will look at all these things in pieces, realizing that they are a bigger part of a whole, and it is very hard to pull them into pieces, particularly as the applicant. I mean, at the end of the day, they have a whole to care for and worry about. So I understand that. Our hope is that by breaking into pieces, they understand kind of where we are today. So when they come back at the next meeting, they may look at some of this and say, we're not moving, it's 12 or nothing. And they may come back to us and go, you know what, we can do the 7-8 here, we can do this here, we can't do that there. That's their prerogative. I mean, they're gonna come back and do what they want to do, what they can do, what they feel is appropriate. We're just kind of giving them the temperature and pulse of the room to have the benefit of that information as they go back. Is that a fair assessment of what you're trying to do?
That's exactly what I'm looking for
Thank you.
this evening.
Okay. Realizing that, yes, we are breaking a whole into parts, and that is not maybe ideal or typical. But, okay, thank you.
I would wholeheartedly agree with that characterization as well, Commissioner Frank. And I hope that this is seen as a benefit to the applicant. It's not a final, but I would see it as, some, give you some definite guideposts to work with. And, there's time still left on the clock, right? Okay, Jackie. let's
Mr.
keep
Hayes, if
going.
we could move on?
Yes, ma'am. That's what, see, everybody wants to manage me, you see?
The next credit request the applicant is seeking is $4.9 million for a transportation improvement consortium. I'm going to ask Marie Pham and Lou Mizrak to come to the table. And the
Hey, I
met
met you on the
explained.
elevator. Oh, yeah. She told me it was raining. I didn't know it was raining. I'm sorry, Jackie.
It's okay. The applicant did explain in the presentation why they feel that this credit is appropriate. We have outlined our position why we could not support this credit. So I would ask that if the commission had any specific questions on the credit request, we could focus on that now. But again, staff does not support this credit, and we can go into the reasons why we don't, but that is the question that we would like to pose to the Planning Commission is, should the applicant receive a credit for $5 million for this Transportation Road Consortium?
Okay. Okay, does anybody want to make any comments from the table about this before we ask?
No, we would leave it up to the commission to ask questions.
Okay. Does anyone here on the dais have questions about this particular matter? Okay, Commissioner Combs, I didn't see your light.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Jackie, can you elaborate on why the county doesn't support this?
Marie?
I'd be happy to.
Thank you.
When we first met with the applicant, it's been several weeks now, one of the discussions that they had was in their previous proffer statement, they were proffering to contribute to the county $8 million, which would, our understanding is, would essentially fulfill their previous commitment with the hub to construct 2 lanes of Shaw Road from what they've said, end of the road down to Innovation Avenue. They asked us to come back and let them know, if we were agreeable with the $8 million. We followed up with them early to mid-May and said, yes, we were agreeable to the $8 million contribution to fulfill that piece of it. And what we've seen now in the proffer statement is that they're willing to give us the $8 million, but now they're asking for a credit of almost $5 million. It's something that's new, that's come in with the 5th submission, and we're still unclear as to where that came from and why. So that's been our big concern. I think one of the things we would need next is a chance to meet with the applicant and get a better understanding of what they're proposing.
Tony,
Mr. Combs?
do you have a response to that?
I do. I'll make it short. I can pull the graphics back up, but I think the best thing to do on this is to continue to see if we can reach some type of consensus. I mean, to cut to it, the slides are easier to look at. $26.1 million for Shaw Road. I think we are in concurrence, 25.1 to construct it. Whiting Turner DTCI, I think that's the right number. $1 million to design it, 26.1. I think we came to concurrence that our impact on Shaw, now again, 4-lane divided, significantly different, much longer section than our existing proffer. Our existing proffers, by the way, we'd always programmed in $4.5 million. Don't know if that's the right number, but that's what we always had. That's what we always had programmed. If our impact, and it's years from now, I think it's 2030 to Shaw, but our ultimate impact on that 4-lane divided road, that's a regional road, is about 16.6%. That's about $4.4 million is our reasonable contribution to the need of Shaw Road. We were willing to give more money. We were trying to give more money and cut a reasonable deal. Again, our money's going to be in the county's hands before we're going to ultimately need it. It's going to take years before we build up enough traffic to even need Shaw Road. We're trying to ignite the consortium, and we're trying to help get it achieved. So at 16.6% of the 26 million, that's 4.4 million. We have proffered 9.3 million total, again, in order to help get that quadrant going. And we think that since it's a regional road and that's more than the capacity impact that we have, that is a reasonable credit request, the 4.9. Can pull the graphic back up if you'd like. That's simple.
Thank you.
Commissioner Miller.
Can I just further clarify? It sounds like here's $8 million for Shaw Road. County, this money is for Shaw Road. But we don't think our portion of it is that much. We're going to offset that over here for something else that we're doing. But it's $8 million for the county. We talk about all the money goes to the county anyway. It really doesn't. The money goes to the county, but it does go to, sometimes proffers go to specific things. And maybe we're saying, here's $8 million for Shaw Road. You got it. But we're offsetting that with $5 million credit that will apply somewhere else. Is that a reasonable way to look at it?
I'm not sure I'm following Mr. Miller. We're actually proffering 9.3.
Okay.
Yeah, 9.3. It's 8.1 for, is it 8 and 9 and 1, right? What's the number? 8 and 1.1.
Right, plus $1 million for design, so 9.
I know what the difference is. Sorry, $9 million for Shaw Road, $8 million for the road, $1 million to design it,
Right.
plus there's $300,000 for the intersection of Old Ox and Shaw. That's where we get to 9.3.
Okay.
To cut to it, again, from our capacity analysis, it's 16.6%. If you do the math, it's $4.4 million. The other monies can be used by the consortium as we talked about earlier, whether it's for Shaw, whether it's for Davis, or if there's some other road that's in that quadrant. I think the county's going to get the money earlier than we're going to have the impact on the road. And having done this on a lot of different similar cases, whether it's Brambleton or Loudon, where we did the interchange, we think this is a fair and reasonable request when you look at the capacity, the impact on Shaw Road.
Right, but so what I'm getting at is, and if I'm wrong, Jackie, please tell me I'm wrong, but what they're proposing is to say, here's a chunk of money for Shaw Road, but we're going to offset with a capital facilities credit a portion of that, which we offset somewhere else for the county's money. It's not, the $39 million isn't all going to the county, here, county, do what you want with it. It's going for specific items along the way that would go into proffer management, correct?
Yes, but the applicant isn't offsetting anything with a credit request. Well, they're offsetting the cost of their development, but we see it as the applicant is proffering to this $9.3 million, but they're asking for half of that back as a credit.
If I may, Mr. Miller, there's another way to look at it, which is our contribution, our long-term transportation impact on Shaw Road at 16% is about $4.4 million. Right. We could have just offered $4.5 million and cut and be done.
Right, so that's the question then.
If we're trying to offer more in order to help encourage the use of those monies, I think this gets to your
Right.
point. The use of those monies in this quadrant and within that mile and a half.
Correct, that's what I'm saying.
Now I see what you're.
Here's $9.3 million for this project, not $4.4 million. Here's $9.3 million for this project, but we're taking a credit of almost $5 million somewhere else in the books, whether it's for a park, whatever it is. It's somewhere else. The county doesn't receive that. The applicant gets the credit for something else that they're not providing to the county. There's still, the $9.3 million is going towards the consortium to build Shaw Road, right?
That is correct.
Otherwise, it would just be $4.4 million. But the county's getting I'm asking this question. The county would be getting $9.3 million towards Shaw Road. The offset, the net, yes, is not $9.3 million, but Shaw Road gets $9.3 million. In other words, if I give my wife, if I give my son, here's $10, son, for you to go to the park. But I need to offset that by taking $5 away from my son's shoe budget. You can't buy the $95. You can buy the $90 because I'm taking $5 away. I'm giving you 10 there, but I'm taking 5 away from over here. Is that what they're proposing?
They're giving us something, but they're taking it out of somewhere else.
Yes, they are. But it's $9.3 million for Shaw, but they're taking it out of somewhere else. Here's Jake. Here's $10 to go to the park, but I'm taking $5 away from your trip to the movies.
Commissioner Miller, the answer is yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Can I just ask a quick question?
Okay.
So follow on the same exact topic that.
Okay, then we're going to go to Commissioner
unfortunately
Kirshner. Okay,
Does staff agree with the $26 million figure?
Yes, we had our internal staff review this. They do concur with that for the 4 lanes of Shaw Road. I guess our concern is we haven't seen something in the proffers committing to basically provide the contribution for the full 4 lanes of Shaw Road. And so at what point do we give them credit for a full 4-lane section when we're only getting the funding for 2 lanes?
I'm not sure I follow that, but
Okay.
let me ask just another follow-on, and it might clear it up. So if staff agrees with the $26 million figure, does staff agree with the 16.6% usage?
No, on that point, we feel that it's closer to 30%, that with the full 4 lanes of Shaw in place, and we've added in for the approved developments for Dulles 2000, for Waterside, and Gateway 2000, and taking a look at the development that's there now, and then accounted for how much of the traffic on Shaw Road we believe would be coming from the Ravenna development, and it was closer to 30%.
So staff's at 30%. So if the applicant and staff work to some sort of agreeable percentage of that 26 million, and the contribution was for that amount rather than a surplus amount and then get a credit for the surplus, would we be having this conversation?
I think if we agreed on their methodology, we wouldn't be having this conversation. So obviously, we need to have another sit-down with the applicant on these numbers. We came to that agreement with the applicant on the interchange. Is they proposed a number. We said, well, we think the number should be this, and we met halfway. I think we could get there with this. Just the methodology was not clear to us.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Kirshner. Commissioner Kirshner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So my question is, so the total cost for Shaw Road is 26 million, right? And what percentage of that, do you have commitments from any other development?
The Waterside development, I believe, is committed to fully fund and construct Shaw Road all the way from Old Ox down to Innovation Avenue as a 4-lane roadway.
But that's not part of this 26 million.
No.
So,
No,
so right now, there's no other development commitment to help defray this cost?
no. Lou, do you want to?
Yeah, the waterside proffer that Marie mentioned, certainly yes, but it's not triggered, so it's that proffer hasn't become.
But it will trigger and it will go towards this 26
when
million
that property
cost.
develops, yes.
And how much is that?
They have committed to construct the road, and then there's a cash in lieu, I believe, with Waterside
So
to.
it's a portion, I'm sorry, it's a portion of this 26, some portion of this 26?
There wasn't an estimate really placed on that. That's from several years ago. The 26 million is the current estimate to build the road.
And what Waterside is, sorry, thank you for the patience on this. And what Waterside, when it's triggered, they will be constructing a part of what is in this 26 million estimate.
Yes. Waterside needs to construct the road. If it's not there when they would otherwise trigger it, if someone else has built it, say Ravenna built that roadway, then there's a cash equivalent, cash in lieu coming from Waterside for that as well.
Okay. Okay.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, and it's the full length from 606 to Innovation.
Yes.
Thank you.
If I may, I can't remember when, Lou, I don't remember when the trigger, it's maybe halfway through the Waterside project, but Ms. Kirsch, is it? Oh, yeah, that's right. It's the first zoning permit, isn't it, for anything south? It's a good thing I've got this team behind me. First zoning permit for any portion of Waterside, Mr. Merrithew and Mr. Moserak held their feet to the fire, requires the full 4-lane section divided from Old Ox all the way down to Innovation Avenue, which would cover all this 26.1 that we're talking about. And if they haven't done it and somebody else were to construct it first, whether it be the county or the consortium, which we're trying to help ignite, then under their existing proffers, Waterside has an obligation for reimbursement. So there's a number of different funding mechanisms available for this quadrant. We got to have somebody step up and go first. That's in part what we're trying to do. I don't know about shoes and movie tickets, but I know about roads, and we want to try and get them going. If I may just suggest, Mr. Chair, we'll do whatever you like, sir. Why don't we have an ongoing discussion, see if we can come to some conclusion, and then come back to you on this topic, if that would be acceptable.
No, if that's okay with the staff, I'm just encouraged that a lot of these previously open items have gotten to a place where you all are trading numbers and getting into the teeth of these things. So that's fine.
We have checked off a lot more boxes than what remain open.
Commissioner Merrithew.
One of the illustrations showed Shaw Road realigned to the east of what was the previous alignment around Waterside. Is that something DTCI or VDOT has evaluated?
Are you talking about the the graphic that was submitted with the fourth submission that had like the blue?
I think I just saw it up on the big screen tonight, so.
Okay. Oh, okay. So the applicant, in order to generate their cost estimate, did have to propose a rough alignment to be able to give that, to a developer or contractor to get an estimate prepared. So that's kind of roughly what they were basing their estimate off of.
Yeah, and it does deviate from part of the existing roadway as you move south from Old Ox Road. There's been some,
South of the state maintenance.
yeah, in that vicinity, yes, it generally shifts to the east. There was some,
I just got the thought that they were driving it over the pit/lake.
No.
Water side.
No,
so I was a little-
it's in
It's
the,
only a Davis.
Okay, thank you.
So Jackie,
Chair Hayes, staff we can move on from this. If the applicant is willing to work with staff on different figures, then we can present those to the commission next month.
okay.
We know that we need to have a meeting and talk about the revised numbers now.
Well, that sounds great. So let's move on.
Okay?
Actually,
I'm sorry, Commissioner Miller.
which says as a point of discussion there was a disagreement between staff and the applicant about the percentage use that Rivanna would generate on a 4-lane divided Shaw. And I would hope that in their conversations, anything that came back to us, we would have a better understanding of, one, why there is such a why a difference and why that difference is double. Because as you look at the development, the innovation interchange was built to access this property, specifically to access this property. And until Waterside puts a shovel in the ground, there is no Shaw Road to access Rivanna from. I mean, there is, but so I like in their discussions about values, I'd also like them to be able to discuss and bring back to us the understanding of the methodology as to why it's 16% versus 30.1%. Because that will help us understand the number better.
I think
I'll move on.
Can he come to the meeting?
Pardon me?
Can he come to the meeting? He's going to be our ambassador. Can he come to the meeting?
He's welcome to attend if you would like.
Okay. Please move on.
Thank you. Okay, the very next thing we'll talk about are transportation contributions. As the commission is aware, staff actively seeks road contributions, regional road and transit contributions. The applicant is proposing to carry over a previous proffer from the hub. The hub is the application that has entitlements on the ground right now. And that proffer committed the applicant to providing a total of $751,000 instead of providing a regional road contribution or transit contribution per unit. So the applicant is continuing to carry over. They will give us $750,000 for the first 1,265 units. And then thereafter, they will provide the typical $6,000 for regional road contributions and $1,000 for transit contributions. The question we're bringing to the commission tonight is this isn't, staff is not going to support this, so we did want the commission feedback. Is this an appropriate type of request for the applicant to ask? Instead of giving us, again, the normal contribution that we would seek per unit, they're giving us an overall $751,000, which would equate to about $594 per unit for the first 1,265 units. The reason that number is 1,265 is because that's how many units they are entitled to today. So we would anticipate about $19 million. Based on the applicant's phasing schedule, they would be proposing about $9.1 million. So there is a difference of about $10 million. So this concept of the applicant carrying forward this previous proffer and then applying the typical contributions, staff does not support this. Is this something the commission could support? And this can be another yes or no question, another type of question. question like that.
Okay, I'm going to go to Commissioner Merrithew first.
Can staff explain the $791,000 number?
That was in the previous proffers. There were two separate proffers, I believe, and one committed them to $300,000. The other proffer committed them to $451,000, but those were the original proffers in the hub.
Were they assigned to a particular project, Lou?
Those, if I recall, and it's been 10-plus years since we did that case, but it was proportional to their impacts on Route 606 for one and for Davis Drive for the other, if I recall correctly. So they were some regional road contributions. They were not tied to specific units. It was just a payment.
And not tied to a timetable or anything like that?
There's a trigger in the proffers, but they were not per unit contributions. They were, we will pay the 300 and the 451 at a certain point in the development, which I don't have in front of me.
All right.
Commissioner Miller.
So the applicant bought a property that had entitlements on it. And that property, the entitlements that they bought said $751,000 for regional road contribution for 1,265 units, which was horrifyingly stupid to have agreed to by the board all those years ago. But that's not the applicant's fault. Much like the applicant bought an interchange that the previous developer built. I'm concerned about the precedent that when someone comes in, because we have contract purchasers all the time that come in to develop something and they flip it to, we get approval from the board and they flip it to the builder, and then so we go back and say, oh, you want something else, well now we want more from you. I'm a little confused as to why we think that a previous mistake by the county, I'd love it if the applicant said, okay, we understand it was a mistake back then, he'll write you a check. I don't see that happening. Although one thing I would say is those 1,265 units originally had some sort of percentage of them were affordable. Whatever that percentage of affordable units was, whatever that number work out, you don't get the I don't pay the $7,000 for all the affordables for everything in the next section. We'll divide it up proportionally, but otherwise, I don't know why we're asking them to do something that it's already been approved. So I'm confused as to why we think we are entitled to go back to the applicant and say, we approved it, but now come back for more because we did a bad job back then.
I should also add that $751,000 is in addition to the applicant constructing the interchange and the realigned section of Innovation Avenue. So all that in total was the proffer package for transportation with the hub. So I want to be clear that it was not just the $751,000 that was proffered. There was other improvements.
The interchange.
And realigned innovation.
Right,
yeah.
Which they did.
They did, yes. I think it's a policy question is partly why this is coming up, because
Fair enough.
we have policy at this point that says there's X dollars per unit for roads and X dollars per transit.
Okay, Commissioner Kirschner, and then,
All right.
okay, Commissioner Combs, did you have something?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I might have missed this. What is the date of the approval for the hub proffers?
I can look that up.
It's in
Roughly
2011, I believe.
2011. Okay. And that proffer package included, Lou, you mentioned.
It included the $751,000 that we're discussing, plus the construction of the interchange, or the remainder of the interchange. There were two ramps on the northbound side that were there that the tax district or VDOT had constructed earlier than that. Basically, the bridge and the loop ramps on the west side of 28, that was constructed by the developer of this property, the applicant of the hub, along with the realigned 4-lane section of Innovation Avenue.
Okay. So
And those were needed in large part to access the property.
So they were essentially getting the benefit of this reduced $751,000 because of the other construction.
They built those two significant infrastructure components, and then the 751 was for some specific impacts on other roadways, fair share impacts.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Merrithew?
No.
Okay,
Mr. Gomes asked my question.
okay. I just want to talk from a housing standpoint. So these additional incentives, aside from the impacts on the roads, are we receiving any additional considerations when we talk about affordability on, as it relates to the units? Jackie? All I see are trade-offs as relates to the impact on the roads, et cetera. Are we getting any additional units or any additional levels of affordability in exchange for
The
any of
applicant
this?
is providing 8% of their overall units as affordable.
That's not necessarily like a, blow your hair back.
They're not required, well, the type of product that they are developing, they are not required to provide ADUs at all.
No, I understand that, but when you say things like not required, that means they shouldn't be here asking for any sort of, then they should just be doing it without our help. Like, so if they're here asking for special entitlements and Z-mods, et cetera, then we have a right to say, help us meet our policy objectives, one of which is to close the gap between, our affordability gap in terms of housing, right? Otherwise, doesn't that make sense?
It does, but I'm struggling to understand your question in relation to what we're discussing.
That's why under these circumstances, we're never going to close the gap. I've been sitting here for 3 hours solving all these different problems. And the first time I ask a question about the difference between 8% of affordable units and 11%, when I'm sitting down here looking at 2,700 units, I'm basically people looking at me like I got 3 heads. And we're just trading around millions of dollars of credits and incentives and the like. And nobody's ever talked about, okay, well, instead of 70% AMI, let's get 60%. Or instead of, 8% of affordable, let's do 10%. Like that part of the conversation is just absent from this whole discussion.
If
How many units across this entire Ravana?
2,719. And Mr. Chair, if I may, because I think there are a couple of good questions and comments, if you'll give me a second. Jackie, can you pull up, I just have 2 quick slides. Just to,
How many square feet of retail?
we've got hundreds of thousands of square feet of retail, about 1.8 million square feet of potential office. The reason I'm pulling up, Mr. Chair, to in part answer your question, we take that incredibly seriously. In fact, when we were here sitting before you 2+ months ago, we were at 6.25% in terms of unmet. We increased by 48 units. We went from 6.25% to 8%. To Jackie's point, you make an eloquent point, which is what are we required, what are we asking for? Under the county zoning ordinance requirements, we do not have to provide any of the unmet housing needs. We think that's incredibly laudable. We think that's incredibly important. It's incredibly expensive, as you well know, and it's particularly expensive when you're talking about this type of construction. It's a lot easier to do it when you're doing 2/2s. You guys see those applications every single week. When you're talking about steel and concrete or even stick constructed at 4 and 5 levels over podium parking, underground parking, there's no comparison. The closest comparisons, for example, if you look to your neighbor to the east, if you look at Fairfax County, again, we wouldn't be required. In Fairfax County, you achieve densities 3, 4 times, 5 times as much this proximate to rail as we do here. So we have much lower densities that we can achieve. Having said that, this ownership who's here this evening and heard you the last time, That's why they directed us to go from 6.25% to 8%. So we take that issue very seriously. The reason I brought, that's not the right one, Jackie. Can you go to slide 4 for me? Yes, ma'am. So just to bring context, because several of you will.
I'm sorry.
Yes, sir.
I apologize.
Of course.
And I apologize for cutting you off. I think that my thoughts are so contrary to the normal way of approaching things, or the way we've looked at things in the past in Loudon, that I think you are looking at. You think I'm talking to you, and I'm not. Because I recognize that you've come up 2 percentage points since we first started talking. So the conversation about going from 8 or 8.5% to 11 is not directed at the applicant. You didn't listen to my question. I said, all I'm hearing about are incentives and credits related to roads and capital facilities contributions and offsets, and credits for those types of things, nothing related to additional affordable units. How are we ever going to close our gap? That is a more sophisticated way of saying, when are we going to put some skin in the game? Because you're right. How can you continue to bear the burden? And the whole idea that is not in the zoning code to require you to do it, then we're going to fix that because it's 2022 and it should require you. And it will. But my point is, and this is not to you, Jackie, I know I'm looking at you, but it's not to you. I'm just making a statement. It's about priorities. We prioritize these roads and whatever else we pay for with the capital facilities contributions. We're not going to close the gap on the affordable housing until we prioritize it in terms of where we spend our money. Because these developers cannot do it by themselves. It's math and it's money. If we want affordable housing, we must spend money also. We have to have a real deal closing fund of our own to help close the gap. We can't force them to do it. Affordability by design. That's just making smaller units so they can afford to build them to try to keep up with our demands. That's not right. So my point is, and this is not to Jackie or any of the people at this table, because they're just hardworking folks, is that while we're collecting money and arguing over the millions of dollars for these roads and all these other things, where is the money? And wait a minute, and they're paying the money per unit, which is hilarious to me, but none of it's being invested in additional affordable units. Isn't that a comedy? That's why I just had to say something. I had to say it. $6,000 per unit, none of it goes into additional units. Can we put $2,000 of that into a housing production trust fund so we can help people build more units? That's not math. I mean, that's not a real formula, but you get my point. I'm being facetious. Okay, I didn't yell this time, John. I just said it.
Mr. Hayes, sorry.
Okay, I'm done.
Mr. Hayes, if I may, sir, I think the issue is none of them are simple tonight, but that's okay. That's why we're here, and we appreciate your guidance and your patience. The issue before you goes to what, and Jackie, I'm sorry, I'm going to hop you to page 40 if you don't mind on my summary. The issue again, this was the two $16 million funds, if you will, page 40, please. We were willing to forego for we think legitimate reasons, we thought we still had a strong argument for Innovation Avenue. And I really appreciate Lou pointing out, when we talked, Mr. Miller, about the $7,000 for 1265, it was $23.5 million for the interchange and Innovation Avenue. And then there were the mitigation measures that Lou alluded to. So it was a $24.5 million transportation policy. What I wanted to focus on, if I may, is I believe where we are, Jackie will correct me if I'm wrong, is the question of, may we grandfather, would the Planning Commission consider the grandfathering of the 1265 units for purposes of the regional road contributions? That's what regional road and transit. That's been done in a number of other cases, as I pointed out. And so there is already precedent for that. We thought in the balance of Innovation Avenue and the concerns that DTCI had and the precedent that's already been set in other cases, one Loudon's a good example, you guys have seen that relatively recently, where they came back in for more units. They were grandfathered in terms of the previous units. We did that in Brambleton on the age-restricted one. I can't recall if Kincora did that as well. But the issue before the commission, I believe, is the grandfathering, which has been done for other cases, reasonable? We think it is. We respectfully submit that it is. But I want to be clear, we're still giving, as highlighted in the middle of the graphic before you, 8.7, almost 8.8 million in regional roads, 1.3 plus million in transit, for a total of over $10 million. And we will drop the Innovation Avenue relocation credit request. We thought that was a reasonable way to, again, fulfill your direction, sir, of cutting to it, asking for less, trying to come to some reasonable conclusion. We do have some other transportation issues to talk about, but I think that's the one. I think that's the question that Jackie was bringing forward.
So, I'm sorry, I just don't understand. So, and I'm finished being. I'm finished with that whole affordable housing thing for now. So, when you say grandfather it, explain to that. I truly just don't understand.
Yes, sir. So the existing entitlements on the property have 1,265 residential units. Under the existing proffers, the requirement was to build the interchange and to reline Innovation Avenue, $23.5 million. Done and done. The holdover of it's at the top of your screen, at $751,000 was the regional road contributions, in addition to the interchange and Innovation Avenue realigned, that were made in that case for the 1265. That's actually now been escalated because of CPI to 915. That's what you see all the way at the right. Our request is to leave that in place for the first 1,265 units, continue to comport with what Mr. Miller pointed out, the purchase that was had, to leave that in place. For the 1,266 unit and all the units to the end, we just follow the typical county policies. $6,000 for a regional road, $1,000 for transit. And that's where you get the 10.0 plus million that's reflected in the middle. So the grandfathering is just leave in place the entitlements as they are today for those first 1,265 units. And staff, to their credit, has always said, we don't like that. We'd rather you didn't grandfather those, but we've done that in several important and similar cases.
And so the point that Commissioner Miller was making is that, I'm saying this for you to confirm or correct me, is that when they bought the property, the entitlements that conveyed with the property allowed for them to, if they use the properties as they in the zoning the way that they bought it and all the proffers that came along, then they would be able to do this and they would only owe the $10 million. Is that what you're saying?
They would only owe, based on the original stuff, if they did nothing else, they didn't improve the development at all.
Right.
They'd only be on the hook for $915,000, which is what they bought. They bought an approval that said this is the deal, and that deal included interchange innovation, which has already been done. So the owner of the property, whether it's the previous hub people or these folks, have already fulfilled the proffer for this land before they put a shovel in the ground to build any commercial or residential. What they're asking is, what I take they're saying is, okay, we want to go above 1265. We'll pay you for all the 1265, but we'll pay you for everything above the 1265. We just want the credit for what we bought what we've done. If these folks were the same people who developed the hub, they'd be saying, we already gave you this much, we'll give you more for the rest of it. That's,
They want credit for the full value of what they purchased,
correct.
even though that full value had not been fully realized before they purchased it.
Oh, all but the 915,000, because the interchange, as Lou was saying before, the interchange and relocation, realigning Innovation Avenue were part of the original proffers.
But they hadn't built the 1,200 units.
Correct.
Right.
Right.
So it hadn't been realized. They hadn't built them.
No, they fulfilled their proffer before they built the first unit.
Right, but they had the right to build them. They just hadn't built them.
Correct.
Right. Okay. I just want to be clear. I'm not saying
Yeah.
I didn't say anything.
Oh, right,
wrong.
right. Yeah. They had. They just.
I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. I just want to
Right.
make sure
Yeah.
I understand what happened. Okay. All right, Tony.
Yeah.
Okay.
I got a question.
Okay. Commissioner Barnes.
For Jackie. How long an approval on a piece of land survives? Like if you approve 1,200 units and
Proffers run with the land, if that's what you're asking. So proffers don't expire.
it keeps on going.
Yes. Proffers stay the way that they are until you amend them or provide a new set of proffers because you're rezoning it to something else. So if the applicant were submitting a ZCPA, for example, if they were just amending their original entitlements and they said to the county, we know that we're going to do this and this is the deal that we've already made with the first 1,265 units, no, we would not expect for the applicant to then come up with this new contribution per unit for the entire property. But we would expect that for new units, like we expect for Concora and One Loudon. This is not an amendment to the existing application, though. It's a new application. So that's why staff has to look at it this way. This is a brand-new application. It's not an amendment to an existing application. So we
Okay,
have to
it's-
treat this like any other application.
It's not just to build those 1,265 homes, or whatever they are. So they're not gonna build those homes. The 1,200, they don't exist there, right?
They don't exist there.
Okay, and they're not gonna be building what was approved for
Right.
before.
This is a
So-
brand-new application.
Yeah, so it's a different game. It's a
say
different ball
that.
game, yes.
But so Jackie, but do I hear you saying, is this a bit of, and respectfully, semantics? Like if they had filed for an amendment, then we wouldn't be having this question?
No,
No?
I don't think it's semantics, it's
No.
the legislative process. They're
No,
coming in with something completely new. They're rezoning the entire property to PDTC. They're not amending the hub proffers. They're
It's like that-
proposing something not entirely different there, but they're proposing a brand-new ZMAP application. So it's not a ZCPA. They're not changing an existing application. They filed an entirely new application.
If I can make the point, we filed an entirely new application to comport with the comprehensive plan that you all helped put in place.
Yeah, that's what I mean. So maybe semantics is not the right choice of term, but it sounds like it's a bit of a quagmire that maybe we can help with, because it sounds like either way he had gone, there was a wall to be hit.
So here's the question. Does the commission support what the applicant is putting before them?
Yes.
Because you said that the proffer runs with the land, and and this is a smart man, so if he could have, he probably would have filed an amendment so that we wouldn't be having this conversation.
if they can build the same homes, 1,200 and something, if they keep the same thing, they can go ahead and do it without any coming up here, right?
Yeah.
The applicant is proposing additional densities.
I know, it's a new ballgame,
completely,
right?
completely different design.
Yeah, so it's a new ballgame.
Okay,
Right.
I got it. I'm
It's
clear.
nothing to do with the old one.
Yes, it does.
No, I'm coming back to you. Okay, I'm sorry, I jumped in. I got what I needed. I know you got a tough job.
Oh,
Commissioner Christian.
thank you, Mr. Chair. So the question on that, you're saying the things that were already fulfilled the interchange and what was the other thing?
Innovation Avenue, realigned Innovation Avenue.
So what happens to the credit for those? You're saying this is a totally different application. Nothing was built at the hub. So what happens to those things that were fulfilled? How does that get rolled into this?
The applicant would carry forward any proffers that remain unfulfilled to mitigate impacts to the site. I don't believe there were credit requests with the previous application.
That's correct. There's no lingering credit, Ms. Kirshner. We're not trying to, there's no lingering credit, if I'm understanding your question correctly.
That's not what she's, I know she's.
Mark
I know
knows
she's
what I'm
asking.
asking.
I know, she's not asking that.
Okay.
What she's saying is, what I agree.
I know you're dying to say it, so I'm going to allow you to say it, because he's
I
going to
appreciate it. Thank you.
explode sitting over there if I don't let him say it. And I'll correct you if you're wrong.
Okay,
Mark.
fair enough. What she's saying is,
Don't talk
if
about
this
it.
were empty land, nothing was ever built around here, and someone was coming in with 2,719 units, the first thing we would say is, build an interchange. The interchange was built. So what I believe Mrs. Kirshner is asking is, if we're still going back to them and saying, we want a regional road contribution for all 2,719 units, her question is, who gets credit for the interchange that was built?
We're giving them credit. We're giving them credit for the interchange.
Okay, I just want to make sure that
Okay.
okay.
No.
Okay.
I'm just glad Mr. Miller didn't talk about movie theater tickets, so.
So could we go back to two things? One, the county policy on this type of issue.
The county policy states we will actively seek road contributions for new residential rezonings.
Unless those, well, then it also says if there's no new units proposed, then we don't expect a change or an an increase in the proffer for those units. I thought there was some policy that said, if there's no new units proposed, we will not expect new road or capital facilities proffers associated with that application. And I'm apparently wrong because I'm getting a whole bunch
No,
of bucks.
I can look
The
to
second
see, I
question,
can look,
and
we
more
can,
simple, is this $751,000 has not been paid. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So we're not talking about credit for something that's been built or paid. We're talking about the deal that was cut on a project that has now gone away, and we're starting from scratch. So, and then the third point is, in terms of those recent applications where apparently we didn't ask for more proffers for residential or something to that effect, were they not pulled out of the original application as separate rezoning applications as opposed to an amendment to the applications? I'm thinking of One Loudon. Was the recent One Loudon application a ZMAP?
One Loudon, that was a ZCPA.
It was CC.
Because they're not changing the zoning, they were just adding units. And they
they're
are
at-
giving us
And in that case,
contributions.
then, the applicant's right that we did not ask for any upgrade on the proffers for the units previously approved.
No, we did not.
I might quibble with, I thought, Jackie, that the county did what you're doing, which is asking, and that.
For new units.
I thought even for the old units, but maybe that's not the case. I thought it was for the old units, because just to be clear, I think it's perfectly appropriate for staff to raise the question for your consideration and recommendation to the Board of Supervisors. I think that's a perfectly legitimate thing for staff to do. I think that the case has been in several similar multi-year, multi-phase projects like One Loudon, where the office market would not support office and the applicant would come back in for additional residential instead, that the decision was made at the Planning Commission level and ultimately by the Board of Supervisors, that the old previously entitled units had a deal cut, we would respect that, and for the new units, you would be subject to the current policies. That's exactly what's before you this evening. That's exactly what we're proposing. Nothing different.
I respectfully disagree with Mr. Calabrese.
Let me ask, what do you think of that comment, Jackie?
That's not an application that I worked on. I can't think of an application that I've worked on where somebody was building something out and we went back and would try to retroactively place a contribution for something that hasn't been built yet. I don't think we have done that. I know we haven't done that. We did not do that with Loudon. We did not do that with Concora. We didn't revisit what the contributions were for Concora. We just expected contributions for each new unit that came in.
And from our perspective, that's what we're proposing. The new units are 1266 to 2719. Let me also make the point very quickly, and I know Lou and Marie would agree with this. This project is trip neutral. That is because we had so much office and retail and other uses in the existing entitlements, but because we scaled those back consistent with the comprehensive plan and increased the residential consistent with the comprehensive plan, this project is actually trip neutral. So we're not adding, theoretically, additional trips to the system. Again, I think that goes to the justification, Mr. Merrithew, of the questions asked, which is a deal was cut for the 1265. That deal included building an interchange, done, relocating Innovation Avenue, done, adding 751 escalated to 915. We're going to fulfill that proffer. For all the new units, we are absolutely comfortable comporting with the existing policies, 6,000 and 1,000. That yields $10 million additional dollars.
Okay, unless something is really just burning, Commissioner Combs gets the last question, and then we're going to go back to Jackie to tee up the straw poll on this one. We're going to keep it moving.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Pardon me, my iPad timed out. The draft proffers include in the introductory statement that these proffers, if approved, supersede and replace all previous proffers associated with the property, including the hub proffers. Couldn't they just make an exception to that statement to say, except for proffers such and such from the hub approved proffers that include that
If this were a
reduced amount?
ZCPA, they could, but not with the ZMAP.
Okay. Thank you.
Because they're not amending proffers. They're superseding them with a new proffer statement. So the question to the commission is, does the commission support the applicant carrying over the $751,000 in lieu of the typical regional road and transit contribution?
Okay, all in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That was 5, right?
Yes.
Okay. There you go. All right.
Okay.
Moving on, Jackie.
That's all I'm going to discuss for this evening.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask, is housing on a future agenda?
Yes, so
So we will get back to the housing issue at whatever time you.
I wasn't prepared to speak on a couple things tonight. I wasn't prepared to speak about affordable housing or the natural resources policies, school issues, use mix. Like, we know that we wanted this to be the focus of tonight's discussion. So I'm glad I didn't schedule us to speak for anything else, but we can, if there are questions that the commission would want answered for next month's work session, you could ask them now. You can direct them to me over email, or you can call me, like things that we can continue to work on with the applicant until July 20th. But Tony covered a lot of what I wanted to cover, and it was really just updates. We think that we're okay with the parking modification at this point in time. We can talk about phasing. The only thing I was going to say is we might have more comments on phasing as we're continuing to review their latest submission. With the design guidelines, I wanted to just clarify to the commission that we're not looking for specific architecture for buildings. It's not something staff is looking for. We're just looking for measurable commitments on how the site will develop out. And this was my last slide.
Could
Okay.
I ask a question, Mr. Chairman? On the design guidelines, and I apologize for just scratching the surface on this, but They were some statement about them being proffered so the county could enforce the guidelines.
So they changed that. There was a statement in there that the design guidelines was going to be used to create another document called design standards, and then that document was going to be used by the DRC within the community, the design review committee they are called. They took that step out, so the design guidelines document that we have, that will be, it's a proffered exhibit. This is what the applicant will have to follow when staff is reviewing the site plans and the elevations and things like that. We will use the design guidelines to make sure that those things are in conformance with the design guidelines. So we're supportive of the applicant taking out this extra step in the process. It makes it a lot easier for us.
Okay, great, thanks.
Mr. Chairman,
Absolutely.
I have a question that is based upon a comment Mr. Calabrese made during his presentation, and since Mr. Reiser is here, the question relates to that and economic development. Is it okay if I ask that?
Sure.
Mr. Calabrese, in your presentation, you mentioned Block A, the office building that is there, that the possibility exists that maybe we will reallocate some of that density to a different portion of the development because it might be better suited to an office building space closer to the retail area. I asked that question with Mr. Reiser here. Perhaps he could shed some light on it. When this project was first presented 18 months ago, one of the features, one of the overarching excitable parts of this project was that there was potentially a user for a 250,000 square foot building in Block A. Is that, if there's a suggestion that some of the density in Block A could eventually be moved to another section, is that because that user is no longer viable by 2024?
Yes.
Okay. That goes a long way to understanding my earlier comment why I would have abstained from a particular amount, because if some things are going to happen sooner than others, there's a benefit to the county that is more than $12 million for Boulder Park. That's why I was asking that question. So it appears right now that we don't necessarily have a user 3 years out or so for the Block A building. Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, with 3 minutes left, could I ask a question about civic uses? Are we all in agreement on the level of civic uses on the property now?
Staff definitely supports the increase in civic uses. Yeah, so we're supportive of their changes that they made to the civic use.
Could I ask the applicant, I know there's interest in a performing arts, and I think you mentioned it, or it's been mentioned somewhere in the documentation about a performing arts facility. Is that still part of the equation for the development?
It is, yes, sir.
Great, thank you.
Okay, commissioners, I would like to end the comments and questions on this particular item and thank our applicant for being present. Not only Tony, but you and all your entire army of developers and subject matter experts and professionals behind you. And thank you once again for what clearly we can tell has been a lot of productive work with the staff since we last saw you. Jackie, for you and your colleagues and all of the expert work that you do always. I see Mr. Reiser in the back. He's always, we know that he is tirelessly guiding the ship. He tries to be anonymous in the back. Thank you for all your hard work and the folks at Economic Development, of course, our own staff that sits up here with us, Mr. Galindo and Ms. Sidnor. So that'll do it. We have, we'll move into our administrative items, so you are free to go. Thank you so much. Unless you have you have any other requests of us? We'll see you next month.
Look forward to it. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. So soon. So, Mr. Galindo, we're going to make the motion. Do you have anything before that?
I have one other brief thing to mention after this.
Okay. So, colleagues, I'm assuming you've read the motion that was sitting at your place when we came in. It's self-explanatory. I'm going to ask Mr. Combs to actually make the motion.
I move that the Planning Commission schedule a public hearing on August 30, 2022, and work sessions on September 15, October 4, and October 20th, 2022, for consideration of the draft Loudoun County 2023 zoning ordinance. Each meeting will begin at 6 p.m. and be held in the boardroom at the County Government Center.
Second.
The motion made by Commissioner Combs is properly seconded by Vice Chair Solomon. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The motion carries and is so ordered. Mr. Galindo, do you have other administrative items?
I have just hit send on an email to the commission with your new password for iLegislate starting tomorrow.
That's for everyone?
Yes, for all of you.
Awesomeness.
Next time you try to use it, use the password in that email.
Okay. Well, unless anyone has anything else, I think that we will, I'm sorry?
Ask that if we can get a calendar put together like we used to have, that we can look at, and when the next meetings, rather than just things like this, you know. This is good, but see what it shows the whole calendar like we long time ago we used to have.
We can update the previous calendar with these new meetings and print it out.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'd like that also. It'd be helpful if we have it all in one.
So to your point, Commissioner Barnes, I will promise to get together with Mr. Galindo sometime next week and see if, so there's a lot of, so the issue is that with adding the dates for the additional Ravana work sessions and the additional zoning rewrite work session meetings that we're going to have throughout the summer, you know, not everybody is as nimble-minded as some of us. Like me, I'm not. So we just want to put them all in one place, even though they may change and shift. And so I'm happy to meet with Mr. Galindo and see if we can find a little bit more of a straightforward way to present them.
And like I told Mr. Galindo, that first Thursday and third Thursday I can't make it. Otherwise, you can put any date you want to beside those 2 days.
Yep. So we'll also try to be considerate of any other, off limits days for the balance of the commission. So I don't know all of those, but throughout the summer we got to have some of those that other people have in there. Like I got my Thursday night tennis. Yeah, like all those other forms of the yeah. Okay, so that is the end of the official business. At this time, we will call the special work session for Ravana of the Loudoun County Planning Commission for Thursday, June 16th, 2022, adjourned. That wasn't too bad.